All right, I'll call the meeting of the Committee of Adjustment to order. As required under the Planning Act, a public meeting is being held prior to the committee making a decision on these applications. Initially, I will introduce our committee, and we've got Mr. Marsh, Ms. Richardson, Ms. Archer, Mr. Strangway, Councillor Yeo, and I'm Mr. Robertson. And the staff present, and I'll just have to read here because it changes, the agenda changes most weeks. We've got online the Manager of Planning, Mr. Hawley. We've got David Harding, Planner 2, Kent Staton, Planner 2, Mark Lahaye, the Acting Secretary Treasurer, Ms. Murchison, our Chief Building Official, and Ms. Turner, our Heritage Officer. And our Recording Secretary in person here is Ms. Crockford. All right. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Ms. Archer, Mrs. Richardson, are there any comments or questions with respect to the agenda? All right, calling the question, all those in favor? And that carries. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? All right. Are there any comments or questions with respect to the minutes? Could I get someone then to move those? Mr. Marsh, do I have a seconder? Mr. Strangway? No further comments or questions? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. The committee will hear comments, gather information, and may ask questions to clarify statements made. The committee may ask and answer questions or redirect questions to the appropriate person. Please note that any information or comments given to the committee during this meeting, they're considered evidence. We will first hear from staff, then the applicant or his or her agent. We will then hear from any person in support of or from those who have questions, concerns, or are opposed to the application. Finally, the applicant or his or her agent will have an opportunity to respond to any of the statements made to the committee. When you wish to speak, I would appreciate those online, first of all, giving us your name, and then we will afford you 10 minutes to make your presentation. I don't think anyone has ever taken 10 minutes to make the presentation, but we will afford you that time limit. And if you find that you can't possibly get it all in, then I will ask the committee if they will give you some further time to finish your presentation. I don't believe that has ever happened, so I don't expect it probably won't today either. But anyway, moving right along. We're initially going to be dealing with file number D03-2020-034, and this is 170 William Street North, former town of Lindsay. Mr. Harding, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee. So this application proposes to permit the creation of a residential infill lot within an established residential neighborhood within Lindsay. Committee, due to the nature of this application, I will be pulling from aspects of the minor variance report as well, even though committee will be dealing with them separately. So first, committee, I want to just identify what these additional green rectangles are on the slide before you, which is something new, but I felt it was worth explaining. So in order to assess the appropriateness of creating this lot, I looked at abutting properties and adjacent properties, and that is what is identified in, or by the green bars rather. So we're dealing with properties that are across the road from the subject parcel, spanning the entire block there. And then we're also looking at properties on the same side of the subject property, one block back. So that's the south side of Elgin Street, east of William Street North, and then the north side of Regent Street, east of William Street North as well. Next slide, please. So here we have the subject property, surrounded by a lot of primarily single detached dwelling forms. There is a semi across the road, and there are some converted dwellings in this neighborhood as well. And then there is some forested land to the east, followed by some mid-rise apartments, and then the Scugog River. Next slide, please. So here we have the proposed severance identified. Next slide, please. And a proposed street facade elevation and the proposed floor plan for this lot. So right now we're looking at a design which the built form will span the entire width of the lot. There will be a covered front porch. Parking will be on a pad in front of the dwelling. Next slide, please. So first, committee, I want to just do a little neighborhood walk. So the picture on the left is me standing across the road from the subject property, looking towards the subject property. So we have the existing dwelling 170 there on the right, and then 174 on the left. And we can see the piece in between where the severance is proposed. In the image on the right, I have moved across the road now to get a closer look at this parcel, which is proposed to be severed. Excuse me. Next slide, please. And committee will notice as well that I've taken the added step of adding the street names and all of the addresses. So for committee's benefit, it might be of help to refer to Appendix B at the same time as you're looking through these slides, just so you have an aerial perspective to correlate with the images I'm showing you. So the image on the left here, we've got the two semis across the road from the subject property. We've got a single detached just over at 145, and then a larger parcel containing a single detached dwelling at 155. So the image on the right is me standing still in front of the semis and panning a little bit more towards the northwest, looking at 155 and the single detached at 157. Next slide, please. All right, and then here, the image on the left is me panning a little bit more to the southwest of the semis. So we can just see the tail edge of the semi number 147 on the screen there, looking at addresses 137, 141, and 145. So we can see here, committee, that we've got a lot of covered front porches. The image on the right is me walking down that full block. So I'm now standing at the northwest corner of the intersection of Regent and William Street North, looking slightly to the northeast back towards the subject property. So we can see 170 there on that image on the right. And then 174 just up there where the proposed severance will be in between those two. And then we can see 16 Regent there as well, which is a newer bungalow. Next slide, please. So here I'm still standing on that same street corner, committee. So what I've done for the image on the left is I've just panned and I'm looking southwards along William Street North. So you can see the building stock there as well. So we've got porches, two-story design, mostly single detached. The image on the right is me now walking across that intersection. So now I'm at the southeast corner of that intersection, looking southwest. So basically on that image on the left, you can see that there's a pedestrian in a red coat there. That's pretty much where I'm standing to take the picture on the right. So then we're just looking southwards along William Street North as well. So we can see here we've got some parking pads in the front yard. There's a white SUV which shows where that parking pad is. Primarily single detached form. Next slide, please. So now for the committee, this picture on the left, I'm still at that same street corner, but now I pan more northeast to look at the lots along the north side of Regent Street. So we've got that newer bungalow on the corner at number 16, and then addresses 4, 6, 8, and 12, which are single detached dwellings. And then the image on the right is me walking further down Regent Street there to take a closer look at those dwellings. So committee, I just want to draw your attention to numbers 4 and 6 there. So these are also smaller lots, which are zoned the same as the subject property. Same thing. So that built form spans pretty much the entire width of the parcel. Next slide, please. So here now, committee, I've moved north of the subject property to the corner of William Street North and Elgin Street. Particularly, I'm at the southeastern corner of this intersection. So we can see on that picture on the left, I'm looking west across the road at addresses 155 and 157. You can see a little bit of the semi-detached number 149 way off to the left there. And then I've just panned a bit to the north, looking out across the intersection to the northwest. Next slide, please. And I'm still pretty much in the same location, committee. I just moved back a little bit from that intersection, and I'm panning a little bit more, looking into the rear yards of those lots that abut Elgin Street, or the south side of Elgin Street. So we've got number 180 William Street North on the corner there, and then we can see a smaller 1970s style bungalow, which is number 11 Elgin, through the rear yard. Next slide, please. So going back particularly to that intersection, looking down Regent Street to the east, panning the camera slightly to look back towards the subject property, where we can see between 170 and 174 where that severance is proposed, with the bungalow number 16 Regent far off in the distance. Next slide, please. So now I've walked down Regent Street. So the image on the right, committee, is still that corner house 180. So they've got surface parking on the side. I believe this house is a converted dwelling. I saw 3 mailboxes, so I believe this has been converted into 3 dwelling units. Then we have number 11 Elgin. Oh, sorry, 11 Regent, my apologies. So 11 Regent is that 1970s style bungalow. They have surface parking as well. And then the image on the left, I've moved down to the cul-de-sac and have looked back towards 180, which is not even in that picture, but we can see number 11 being that low-rise bungalow again, number 9 and number 7. So number 9 is an older dwelling with surface parking in the front yard, as well as evidenced by those 2 cars that you can see in front of the dwelling. Next slide, please. And I just did a quick pan, committee, to look at the dwellings on the north side of Regent as well. So same thing, we've got smaller dwellings on smaller lots and a lot of surface parking here. Next slide, please. So now I'm on the subject property. So I've actually walked into the rear yard of the proposed severed for the image on the left, and I'm looking out towards William Street North. And then the image on the right, I've just panned to the south to look at the backyard on the proposed retained. So we can see the stucco detached garage in the center there. Next slide, please. And then the image on the left, committee, is the south interior side yard on the proposed retained, with the detached garage behind. And then, committee, the image on the right is me standing pretty much against the north face of the detached garage, or somewhere in that vicinity, looking north across the retained, and then as well the proposed severed. So this is looking more into the backyard, what the proposed severed would be beyond that chain link fence. Next slide, please. And then 2 final images here, committee. So the image on the right is the rear yard of the retained that's beyond that chain link fence. So this is the section that's kind of to the east of the garage, with the lot line, the rear lot line, being somewhere along where that tree line is that you see. And then I decided on the image on the left just to take a picture of the side, the north side rather, of the house on the proposed retained lot. So Charlotte, I'm going to ask that you can back it up to slide 6 now, please. So just to conclude that sidewalk committee, so what I gather from this is that we've got buildings in this neighborhood of a variety of ages, although they do tend to trend towards the older. We have a variety of lot sizes, and we have a variety of built forms, although it's primarily in a single detached dwelling form. Somewhere around the 2-story mark, we've got some that are less and some that are a bit more. In terms of parking arrangements, we don't have a lot of attached garages. What we are seeing here is a lot of detached garages when they do exist behind the dwelling in the rear yard, or parking pads either beside or in front of the dwelling. So when we are looking at creating a new lot, we must examine if it's appropriate. And in order to examine that appropriateness, we have to make sure that we review applicable provincial and municipal policy. So the 2020 Provincial Policy Statement is one such applicable document. So policy 2.6 of the PPS in particular refers to protecting cultural heritage and archaeological resources. Due to this property's proximity to the Scugog River, it's within 300 meters, an archaeological assessment was conducted. The owners also worked with the Heritage Planning Officer to develop a facade in keeping with some of the neighborhood's more notable characteristics. Building that spans the width of the entire lot, front porch to add character, lots of windows, parking pad. I do also want to make note that the Heritage Officer did comment on the application, and that is included in the report. And the officer has no concerns with the proposal, which has been arrived at and presented to you today. In light of Cameron Clark's and Grant Walcott's comments that were received as a result of the circulation of the consent application, their comments were forwarded to the Municipal Heritage Committee, and the committee did review this proposal. It did vote to receive the proposal for information. So what this means, committee, is that the Heritage Committee has no further comment to provide on this proposal and is letting the Heritage Officer's comments stand. I have invited the Heritage Officer here today to comment on additional aspects that the Heritage Committee, should committee wish to have further questioning. Section 1.1.1 and 1.1.3 of the PPS also directs growth to occur in settlement areas and encourages intensification in these settlement areas in order to establish efficient land use patterns and to better utilize existing services such as transit, water, and wastewater services. Section 1.4 also directs municipalities to provide for a variety of different housing options to meet a variety of different needs and incomes. To conclude, I find that this application is consistent with the PPS. The 2019 Growth Plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe is another applicable provincial document. So this growth plan also directs growth to occur within settlement areas. Intensification assists in the creation of complete communities via more compact built form, which optimizes existing infrastructure and services. The growth plan also mirrors the PPS in directing for the creation of a mix of housing stock. I find that this application conforms to the growth plan. The Town of Lindsay is an applicable municipal document. As the Lindsay secondary plan is under appeal, it is the Town of Lindsay official plan that remains in force and effect. The subject property is within the residential designation of this official plan. And due to the nature of this neighborhood, the property would fall within the low density residential policies of the residential designation. So this proposal is for a lot and built form that is in keeping with what is provided for in that designation. That designation allows for single detached, duplex, and semi-built forms. And we have a single detached, which is proposed. So I find that this application conforms to the official plan. The application is also subject to a zoning compliance review. A little more than half the block of the subject property is within the R3 zone. So this is one of those parcels. Everything to the south is also within the R3 zone. So when we look at lot creation, we look at what area and frontage is for the severed and retained. And we also look to see whether the buildings on the retained will comply with setbacks from the mutual lot line and ensure that lot coverage is met. So there is zoning compliance on the retained parcel. The severed property complies with the zoning bylaw with the exception of the lot frontage requirement. It is 0.75 meters deficient. This lot frontage deficiency is, in my opinion, negligible, especially since the dwelling design proposed is to span the entire width of the parcel. And we have a lot of visual interest and character to this facade that is in keeping with what we find in this neighborhood. As a result, I am recommending a condition be included that a variance be considered. Since the writing of this report, additional comment has been received from the owners of 155 William Street North, which has been included in your amended agenda package. Staff do wish to reiterate that the Heritage Officer and the Municipal Heritage Committee have considered the matter, and there is no objection to this proposal. I will also add that I have been in further discussions with the owners, and in order to further and formally tie the house facade that is proposed to a decision of committees, I will also be recommending that a condition be added or recommended to be added to the variance approval. In these submissions, there is some question about what the apparent frontage of the smaller lots in the neighborhood are and how that compares with what's being proposed now. So I do want to reiterate that just as those lots span, the built form spans the entire width of those lots, or as much as is possible, what is being proposed here is very much the same. Built form that's going to span the entire lot, no driveway beside or behind, is just the parking pad in front. Thus, the widest possible built form and the most wall space on the first floor to provide visual interest in the form of windows and a front porch is proposed. Committee will also see there was other correspondence questioning Enbridge's presence on the site. The owners did respond to that and have clarified that it had to do with upgrading the HVAC system for the existing dwelling, nothing further. Staff respectfully recommends that the application be granted, subject to the conditions identified in Appendix G of the report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. Are there questions of the planner? Mr. Marsh, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Harding, in a very, very thorough way, perhaps beyond and above what is normally required, but I understand when there's some concerns from the public that the more information is sometimes better. And that brings me normally, and again, it's helpful, normally we don't even take into consideration the width of the other lots within the neighborhood. Like I've never seen this on a report before. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would remind committee that it's very rare that they actually see consent applications. So while committee might not have seen it before, I have done it for other infill reports. They just have not been before committee.
Well, it's something that you always take into consideration, that and that's where it suits the area. My next question would be the plan that's submitted, that they've submitted to build on that lot. Can that be a condition of? What guarantees do you have that's what's going to be built on the lot?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So this becomes the challenging question. So we feel that in this case, the best guarantee we have is, instead of attaching that condition through consent, is to attach it specifically to the variance. So if committee approves the consent, once we move on to consider the variance, I will be recommending a condition very similar to what committee attaches to its other variance approvals, which is that construction proceeds substantially in accordance with the submitted facade that's in that appendix.
That's what I was referring to, actually. Excuse me, I'm sort of combining the two as well. So we can put a condition in the variance that says the attached drawing is what's going to go there. simply so that the people can't sell the lot to someone else and they come up with something totally different. So we do have the ability to say that is the plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I believe so. I would be more, or I am proposing to be more specific to say that we are locking them into the facade rather than the floor plan so that they can make changes to the floor plan if it's necessary. And the changes to the floor plan would not affect the facade.
And then just one other thing, normally does the heritage officer always review severances and variances?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Not always, but when it is in close proximity to a heritage resource, they are circulated.
Oh, thank you.
Further questions of the planner? Ms. Archer?
For you, please, to Mr. Harding. The condition number 1, am I understanding that if the city decides to widen William Street, the side lot line may be kind of zigzag?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct. The owners have actually been very proactive and had their surveyor already look at what the road allowance width is. The width that they've come back with does show that there is a deficiency. So now we know that that lot line will have to have a bit of a jog, but to the extent that it's required, we don't know. That's something that will have to be worked out with engineering in terms of how much frontage they still need to take.
Anything further of the planner? Mr. Strangway, go.
If it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I do wonder if we could just have a brief comment from the heritage officer since she's been involved in this.
Yeah, Ms. Turner, are you online? Ms. Turner, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, Ms. Turner.
Sorry, I was just, were you looking
yeah,
for just a general
Mr.
comment on the application?
Yeah, Mr. Strangway, one of the committee members, asked if maybe you could just comment on your involvement there.
Yes, for sure. So, so I was circulated on this application when it originally came in. That's traditionally what happens when applications for various planning matters are received that either directly impact a heritage property or are adjacent to a heritage property. So this one's adjacent because it's across the road. I reviewed the application and because and mentioned to the owners that the design that they submitted would need to conform in general to the heritage character of the area. So looking at things like putting a porch on the front, the single detached built form, the 2 stories, the general massing of it, as well as the arrangement on the windows in the front, which as you can see in the elevations is what they've submitted. I provided comments to our planning staff, which were generally in support of the application. On one hand, this is because infill housing in mature neighborhoods is something that's usually supported from a heritage perspective as a good way of increasing density, but maintaining our heritage properties. And also because it generally keeps with the character of the existing neighborhood. Looking at it in terms of the heritage property across the road, I determined that there was little, if any, impact on the heritage attributes of that property. The application was also taken to the Heritage Committee under the cover of a staff report with the elevations and the site plan, as well as general information on the background of the application. The committee discussed the application at their meeting and decided not to provide comment on it because in general, they were supportive of this infill application.
Further questions, Mr. Strangway?
No, that's very helpful. I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Any other questions of the heritage officer? Thank you very much for your comments. Are there further questions of the planner? I have a question, Mr. Harding. You mentioned in one of your slides that to the south and on the east side there is a bungalow, a relatively new bungalow. Do you know how long ago that may have been built?
Generally, yes, Mr. Chair. I believe it went through the severance process through our office not more than 6 years ago. So that dwelling is definitely since then.
Okay, so that's a relatively new structure on William Street there, just south of where we're talking?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Anything further of the planner? All right, being none. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
Yes, we are online, and Doug Carroll speak on our behalf.
All right.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee, staff. Mr. Chairman, I understand there are concerned neighbors who wish to speak to you. I'm happy to step down and allow those persons to address their concerns to the committee and then respond comprehensively after that. Otherwise, if you want a partial presentation now, I'm happy to proceed. I'm in your hands.
Now, I think we'll follow protocols and go ahead with your presentation, and then we'll see what evolves as a result of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The character of this neighborhood has been described as stable and diverse, with a variety of single detached, semi-detached, and possibility of accessory dwelling units or converted dwellings in the neighborhood. The neighborhood that Mr. Harding investigated has been accurately described. The broader neighborhood meets the same description as Mr. Harding provided to the committee. There is a range of different lot and house sizes and configurations in the area around the subject lot, north, south, east, and west, beyond the first block. They are generally a range of bungalows, but predominantly 2-story and a few 2.5-story with residential units use established in the roof line. They all have a reasonably consistent front yard setback and a variety of widths of the buildings in proportion to the lots. I noticed that most of the dwellings provided and complied with the 4-foot, 1.2 meter side yard setbacks established in the zoning bylaw. The conveyed lot will have a frontage of 9.25 meters, which is 0.75 meters shy of the minimum requirement of 10 meters. The frontage of the retained lot, if you look at your surveyor's sketch, that frontage is 20.34 meters, which will allow the existing character dwelling to remain in place and maintain that established character of the street frontage and the neighborhood. The only variance that this property requires is to the required the front lot line width. And the proposal is to reduce that with a variance subject to the committee's approval from 10 meters down to 9.25 meters. The proposed design of the new house is similar to the facades in the neighborhood. The elements of architecture have been identified on the appendix to your report. The facade elevation is detailed, satisfies the requirements of the city's Heritage Committee, satisfies the requirements of the city's Heritage Officer, and is generally consistent with the 2 and 2.5 story samples of existing dwellings and consistent with the front yard setback and variety of widths existing in the neighborhood. I agree with Mr. Harding's analysis of the policy statement as he's got it outlined in his report. The evaluation is thorough and concise, as is his analysis of the growth plan with respect to this proposal. The analysis for the application in the context of the Lindsay official plan is also accurate, and I would remind the committee that the heritage conservation policies of the Lindsay official plan require staff to do as they have done, which is to coordinate the conservation efforts with comprehensive planning needs in order to benefit the community. There is no significant impact on the established character of the neighborhood. There is no loss of residential use in the established character and in the established lots abutting and adjacent to the property. The redevelopment is permitted by the provincial policy statement, the provincial growth plan, the Lindsay official plan, and with the exception of 3/4 of a meter, the lot is permitted by the zoning bylaw for the town of Lindsay. The elevation drawing the revised elevation drawing demonstrates how the owners have had regard for the heritage resources in the built form and how the architectural detail is complementary to the established character within the neighborhood. Accordingly, I agree with Mr. Harding's assessment that the consent should be granted with the proposed conditions, and we have no objection to the proposed recommendation that the application be granted or the proposed conditions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions of Mr. Carroll? All right, thank you again. All right, is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of the application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to this application?
Mr. Chair, I wish to speak in opposition to the applications.
Your name, please?
It's Walida Clark.
All right, go ahead,
I'm here
please.
with Cameron Clark. We're the owners of 155 William Street North, and I'm also a barrister and solicitor.
All right, thank you, and please go ahead.
Thank you. Chair Robertson, Vice Chair Marsh, members of the committee. Before I address my submissions, which in summary have been submitted to the Committee of Adjustment, I wish to raise a procedural point, and that is that we were not provided with the addendum prepared by the planner in advance of today's meeting. We received the initial report and we've prepared our submissions based on that, but it's clear from the presentation that Mr. Harding presented today that there was more information in that report than was provided to us. And as a procedural point in terms of following procedural process required of Committee of Adjustment, as well as any administrative body, we are entitled to see the information that was submitted to Committee of Adjustment.
All right, let me stop you there. And Mr. Harding, do you wish to respond to that, or Mr. Hawley?
I can, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Harding.
There's no additional information that I've provided. I've only provided the additional comments from the Clarks in committee's amended agenda package.
All right, you heard, Ms. Clark, you heard those comments from the planner. Go ahead.
Well, there's particular photos that were presented today, one of which is actually inaccurate. That's the photos claiming to show 6 and 8 Regent Street. And those do not match up with the photos that I have filed of, 4 and 6 Regent Street. So that is, if I had seen that ahead of time, I could have corrected it in what Mr. Harding has presented. But in what Mr. Harding showed us today, that photo does not match up with those properties.
All right, it sounds like a technical issue to me in that you're talking about Regent Street. So let's continue on with your comments and we'll see where it goes from there.
Thank you. So I'd like to, the committee has what I have filed, is that correct?
Yes, we do, I believe, yes.
And that's a 7-page document, including photographs. So I'm going to go through this briefly with some additional comments. Mr. Harding says that there were no comments submitted by the Heritage Committee, but what we have provided from a member of the Heritage Committee, Councillor Mr. Ashmore, in an email dated March 15th, clearly states that the matter was briefly discussed in February at our meeting. He says, I believe it's gone back to planning. I'm not on the planning committee and I'm not sure when it is coming back from staff. So there seems to be some kind of misunderstanding on Mr. Harding's part to say that there were no comments received from the Heritage Committee when the Heritage Committee member is saying to us, this matter was not decided by Heritage Committee. And so again, it is an important point to follow, that the planner has a duty to follow the appropriate process, and that process was not followed because we have evidence. Mr. Harding knew of our objection, including on the historical grounds, on January the 9th.
Let me stop you there.
Therefore,
I'm going to stop you there
Yes.
for a minute. Do we still have Ms. Turner online from the Heritage Committee? Ms. Turner, are you able to hear what Ms. Clark is saying?
Yes, yep.
All right. I asked you, she's indicating that there were no comments from the Heritage Committee, and in fact, I believe Councillor Ashmore, who's a member of that committee, indicated that it was still in some process. Can you comment on that?
It's not still in process. I'm not entirely sure what Councillor Ashmore's understanding of the matter was, but the committee received the application. They reviewed it at their February 4th meeting, and after the review, they decided not to provide comments. And that was communicated back to the planner.
All right. Thank you for that. Let's bring Ms. Clark back on.
Thank you.
Ms. Clark, you heard
I
those
would-
comments? Go ahead.
I've heard those comments, sir, and I can advise that I've reviewed the minutes of the meeting. There was another proposal put forward on a different property. That one was voted on by the committee, Heritage Committee, and Heritage Committee voted to approve it. So there's a difference between an approval and a difference between receiving for information. And this issue, it's not, with the greatest of respect, up to the Ms. Turner to make the decision on this. There's a Heritage Committee with a specific mandate, and they have not been permitted to follow their mandate. And as you said, my submissions are evidence, so I will give that evidence now. I've confirmed with the committee that they were under the belief that this matter would be coming back to them. So the statement that there are no comments is inaccurate and misleading, and it is not appropriate that this matter proceed without the input. Further, I can advise that, as I was stating before the interruption happened, that this February 4th meeting was well after we had submitted to Mr. Harding our objection. That was dated January 9th. Therefore, if this had gone properly to Heritage Committee, we should have been notified that it was being put forward to Heritage Committee and being given an opportunity to make submissions, which we were denied. So not only did Heritage Committee not get to do their job, we did not get an opportunity to present our position to Heritage Committee. And as again, I will give evidence of the fact that I've heard from Heritage Committee that our position would have been considered, and they were very interested in the very extensive submission we have on the historical relevance of this property and of this block.
All right, let me
So-
stop you there. Ms. Turner, do you
Yes.
wish to comment any further on Ms. Clark's comment?
Sure. Just so the committee is aware, the Heritage Committee, when it comments on planning applications, does so as essentially a third-party commenting agency. So when there are objections to a planning matter, those objections come forward to the Committee of Adjustment. The Municipal Heritage Committee does not address third-party objections. It simply provides comments based on its review of the application, as well as the heritage policy framework at the city. To follow up on Ms. Clark's comments on approval versus providing comments, the other application that was reviewed at the February 4th committee was actually a heritage permit application, I believe, which the committee does either approve or deny. So it's not related to a planning application. It's related directly to an alteration application for a heritage property.
All right, Ms. Clark, I think we're going to move away from the heritage thing now. Let's hear what else you have to say with respect to this application.
I would just like to briefly continue on that point, Mr. Chair, because the issue of procedural fairness and natural justice should be the primary concern of the Committee of Adjustment, as it should be for any administrative body. And I also would like to emphasize that the planner Mr. Harding has a duty to the city, not the applicant. And his duty is to consider the impact to the city as a whole, including to historically designated properties and the heritage of the town of Lindsay, former town of Lindsay, now city of Kawartha Lakes. So I was surprised to hear that the applicants have their own planner, Mr. Carroll, because no report was submitted to me by Mr. Carroll, and Mr. Harding seems to have written the report from the perspective of the applicant. I remind the Committee of Adjustment, it is in fact the planner's duty to the city of Kawartha Lakes, and in my submission, and I will continue with that, he has not fulfilled his responsibility.
All right, we
Point
don't,
number two.
yeah, excuse me, we don't get into personal opinions with respect to planners or what you may have to say as well, so we'll stay away from that. You've made your point, I believe, with respect to your opposition to what's gone on relative to the Heritage Committee. I would appreciate it now if you would move on with other points that you may have, and I'm going to forward you 5 more minutes.
Thank you. Sir, I'm not criticizing Mr. Harding personally. I'm pointing out to the Committee of Adjustment the legal duty that exists. That's all I'm doing.
No, we
I don't
understand that.
care
Thank
if
you.
it's Mr. Harding or if it's anybody else. It's about the duty that's owed. Next to point number 2, Mr. Harding, or I will say the planner, to avoid using Mr. Harding's name then, the planner is using, as was suggested, to be comparable properties, only one property is of a smaller size than the permitted lot size, and that was shown to be 6 Regent Street, which again, the photo that I've submitted is in fact showing 6 Regent Street. I'm not sure where Mr. Harding was for his photo, but my photo shows 6 Regent Street and 4 Regent Street. And those homes, the one at 6 Regent Street is 8.9 meters, but it has a mutual drive with the property beside it being 4 Regent Street. Together, they add up to 20 meters. So when that subdivision was permitted, it took into account the mutual drive, which effectively from street side makes it look like the property at 6 Regent Street has a full 10 meters. That property as well is over 100 years old and is of a brick construction. And that home, by its age, clearly predates the bylaw. So it's may have a smaller lot size, but it was before the bylaw existed. Also, that property is about as far away as you can be in the block from the subject property. It is around the corner and at the dead end of Regent Street. So it's not even in a comparable line of sight. The other properties that have been suggested by the planner as being comparable do in fact have a 10-meter frontage. They are 147 and 149 William Street. They're also over 100 years old, significantly predating the bylaw. And yet they still have a 10-meter frontage, even though they're a semi-detached home sharing a common wall. So even those properties comply with what is now the bylaw. Mr. Chair, point number 3 is the proposed development is not in keeping with the neighboring homes. The photos that we have presented show that the homes in the immediate area are all in excess of 100 years old, of red brick from the local Fox Brickworks in Lindsay. And they have a history. These homes were all constructed in relation to that of our home at 155 William Street, a very significant cultural and historical landmark. They were all constructed around that time and in support of the use of the Carew Lumber Company. When we look at the proposed development, it is not in keeping with the character of the neighborhood, either in lot size or in design. It is a vinyl-sided modern construction that, in spite of the plan to have a porch in the front, does not meet the historical character of this section of William Street North. Point number 4, the owners of the applicant property are not residents of the property, so they will not be impacted by their development decision. Mr. Beamish, according to his application, lives in Pleasant Point, north of Lindsay, and Ms. Jarvie lives in Port Perry. Their application is based on their desire to develop the property, which is based on a financial gain, and not on any personal need that they have. They will not have to live with the consequences of what they build beside them in terms of a home that almost takes up the entire width of the substandard lot. Whereas we have resided at our home at 155 William Street North, which actually takes up a very good portion of the block for over 22 years. And in that time, we've dedicated significant time, energy, and resources to maintaining this historically significant property. The due care and attention we have devoted to our property should not be dismissed over the fact of some outside owner wanting to develop a property for their own personal gain and not in keeping with the character of this area. Those are my submissions.
And we thank you for that. Are there any questions of the deputant from committee members? All right, being none. Thank you very much, Ms. Clark. We appreciate you taking the time to express your comment or opinions there. All right. Is there anyone else online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? In opposition to this application?
I would like to.
All right, and your name, sir?
That's Grant Walcott.
All right.
So I'm reside in 174, the house that's to the north of this proposed lot. I just have a couple of points. When we purchased our house probably about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, we were under the impression that that lot could not be severed. And one of the biggest selling features for my wife and I is that it has got a lot of space of land on either side so that we could enjoy the outside in the nicer months. We have a garden on that side. If you were to put a house up there, it would defeat the purpose of the garden. And lastly, actually, I think that's pretty much it. But yeah, it's the land that it's proposed on would pretty much be wall to wall for us if it wasn't for our lot size being wider and allowing for us to have a garden and more grass on that side. We would practically be able to touch their house from our house. And like I said earlier, this is a huge selling feature for us, is that we were able to have space on either side of us and to be able to have a good size of land. Those are my points.
All right, and thank you very much, sir, for those. Are there any questions of the deputant? Yeah, go ahead, I guess. Okay, Mr. Marsh has a question of staff. Go ahead, Mr. Marsh.
I'd just like to go back to Mr. Harding just to clarify. The application was circulated within 400 meters?
Through you, Mr. Chair, for consents it is 90.
Could you repeat that, Mr. Harding?
So I will just confirm. The circulation distance was 60 meters.
60 or 16?
60.
Further questions, Mr. Marsh?
And that's what's required under the Planning Act?
That is correct.
All right. Are there further questions of the previous deputant or Mr. Harding? All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you taking the time. Is there anyone else online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? In opposition to this application? All right. Mr. Carroll, do you have any comments with respect to the comments that were made by the former or the previous deputants?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Briefly, I'd like to point out and indicate that I agree with the evaluation provided by Ms. Turner and the evaluation and the action taken by the city's Heritage Committee. They're both appropriate and comply with the policies and procedures put in place by council. it is appropriate to identify and note the distinction, as Ms. Turner identified, with the Heritage Committee's decision-making process, and that they're dealing with two different types of applications under the Heritage Act and under their role and responsibility assigned by council in setting up that committee. There's been no indication that their discharge of that duty has been flagrant or inaccurate. We recognize that the committee attempts to not give weight to comments about persons. Whether a person lives somewhere or somewhere else is not germane to a planning matter. Whether somebody presumes a motive for an application is financial or otherwise is also not appropriate nor relevant to the planning evaluation. And finally, with regards to the side yard setback, if you look at the appendix to the severance report being the surveyor's sketch, you'll see that the proposed side yard setback abutting the residential lot to the north is 1.25 meters, which complies with the minimum side yard setback established in the Lindsay zoning bylaw. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all.
All right, being done. I believe, yes, Mr. Marsh? Yes, please.
I'll move that the application be approved, and we'll speak to it with the seconder.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Yeo? Go ahead, Mr. Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Mr. Yeo. You know, I commend the Clarks on their efforts of preserving the property that they own, but there's nothing that they brought forward here that applies to this committee, and whether we support this or whether we support the variance. Unfortunately, it's a situation where it's been mentioned, God forbid, but if one of the houses along that street should burn down, it won't be replaced identically to what it is. And this committee isn't here to look at that type of thing. We're to look at the facts, and the facts are that, in fact, it can be put there with a very minor variance. So I ask for the committee's support.
Councillor Yeo?
I have nothing to add to that, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Archer, go ahead.
A friendly suggestion, I think they want the minor variance included in one of the conditions.
I'll go to that once we're finished with comments. I'll just ask Mr. Harding to update. Okay, anything further on the motion from committee members? All right, Mr. Harding, my question is to you now. There's a motion on the floor, but I know you mentioned something with respect to perhaps amending the conditions. Would you update us on that, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So just because of how interrelated the variance and the consent applications are, I will let committee know what the recommendation will be for the variance, but there's no proposed changes to the consent, which is what's on the table or on the floor now for committee's decision. So what I will be proposing to be added to the variance.
Yeah, can we leave that for the variance?
Oh, absolutely, Mr. Chair.
All right, I've got a motion on the floor with respect to the consent at 170 William Street North. There are no further comments from committee. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. I would just say as well, perhaps to echo Mr. Marsh's comments, Mr. Harding, this was very detailed, and obviously it needed to be, because I respect the fact that the Clarks and others took the time to speak to this issue. Obviously, it's close to their heart, and we appreciate them taking the time. And at the same time, we appreciate the very good job that you did with respect to this. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, we're moving right along as soon as I can find the agenda. We're now dealing with file number D20-2020-044, and this is 170 William Street North, Town of Lindsay. Go ahead, Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My presentation will be brief. I do just want to draw committee's attention to page 3 of the staff report. I won't bother going through the slides. They're pretty much a mirror image of what was just presented to you. So again, we have a neighborhood which through this chart shows that there's a variety of different frontages to the lots here. So really in terms of the lot fabric character, the character is variety. And the deficiency we're talking about is not that major. We're talking about a 0.75 meter reduction in the lot frontage. The building that's proposed is going to comply with all other aspects of the R3 zone. So therefore, I am of the opinion that this proposal meets the 4 tests for minor variance. The built form and the lot is going to be in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. It's not going to be noticeable, in my opinion, this 0.75 meter reduction, and is not that far out of what the zoning bylaw permits to begin with. And it is within the residential designation of the Lindsay official plan. We're proposing a single detached dwelling, which is in keeping with the intended uses of that designation, in particular the low-rise density residential area, which this neighborhood is classified as, which really sees built form as being a single detached, semi-detached, or duplex type dwelling. A single detached is being proposed. So committee, my proposal here is that in order to formally tie the proposed building facade to the building approval process, that we add a condition to the request, or to the proposed conditions rather. And that is, so after the sentence that this application be deemed to be refused if consent application DO3-2020-034 lapses, put a semicolon, and next line, bullet point 2, that the building construction of the dwelling related to this approval shall proceed substantially in accordance with the elevation in Appendix D submitted as part of report COA 2021-013, which shall be attached to and form a part of the committee's decision. Staff respectfully recommends that the application be granted, subject to the conditions identified in the report as amended by staff. Before I conclude, I do just want to say that some of the comments that were received previously from 155 and 174, the owners of, have also been attached to this application because they did reference the variant specifically. So I do just want to make note that those comments also apply to this application. But due to the discussion we just had, I feel that those comments have been addressed satisfactorily where they can, and that this application still meets the 4 tests for minor variance. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions of the planner? Mr.
Thank you. Being somewhat new to the planning committee, is it normal, Mr. Harding, to put a condition in as far as the appearance or style of the building?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it is quite common for us to include in conditions of approval the facades which are agreed on between the owner and staff and committee.
Thank you.
I'm sure you meant relatively new to the Committee of Adjustment. Are there any further questions of the planner? All right, thank you. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to this variance, the application?
Thank you, Chairman. Since before, I'm happy to stand down while the concerned neighbors express their perspective on the application, or do you want me to proceed now? I'm in your hands.
We'll stick to the usual process. Mr. Carroll, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to the 4 tests, I agree with Mr. Harding. I would just be repeating his evaluation of the analysis he's provided in the report. But for the record, I will say that I agree that the variance is minor in nature and the proposal is desirable and appropriate for the development and use of the land. The variance maintains the intent and purpose of the official plan and maintains the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. The variance is required because the lot frontage is 0.75 meters shy of the required 10-meter minimum lot frontage. The test is not to maintain strict and rigid compliance with the dimensions provided in the bylaw, but the intent and purpose of the provisions in the bylaw. I would remind the committee that the proposal does not establish a precedent. It does not lead to substantial change in the neighborhood. It does not change the character of the neighborhood. Noting, however, that the Clarks have maintained and improved upon, or the other large single-family detached dwelling lots in the larger neighborhood of these main streets of Regent, Elgin, and William. The applicant would be permitted to construct the dwelling as shown on the surveyor's sketch at 1.25 meters from the north and south side lot lines, which conform to the zoning bylaw. So the concern with respect to being too close to the north lot line is understood, but the proposal complies with the requirements of the zoning bylaw. The Public Works Department has not indicated whether it does or does not require a road widening or what extent that is. The provisional consent addresses the concerns identified and required to be reviewed in section 5124 of the Planning Act. The minor variance application meets the requirements set out in the Planning Act with regards to the 4 specific tests. None of those tests relate to the persons living on the street, the persons proposing the application, or the persons who will reside in existing and future dwellings on the street. It's not the best practice to zero in on one unique character of a few large properties. The proposed development would respect and reinforce the existing physical character of the neighborhood in accordance with the requirements of the Lindsay official plan, in accordance with the criteria established by the Heritage Committee and Council's duties and responsibilities assigned to that committee. We've heard from Ms. Turner, the Heritage official for the city, and there is no concern about the details shown in the facade elevation provided in the staff report to you as being uncharacteristic or less than acceptable to the standards of the city for this heritage neighborhood. In summary, Mr. Chairman, the proposed development would be in keeping with the character of the neighborhood and would continue to provide for appropriate amenity space and parking in accordance with the established character in the existing close, smaller neighborhood as well as the broader neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions of Mr. Carroll? All right, thank you, Mr. Carroll. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? All right, I assume, Ms. Clark, you'll be wishing to speak in opposition to the application?
I will, Mr. Chair, and for the record, I would like to not repeat the submissions I made with respect to the last application, but I wish those comments to be applied to this matter in addition to some further comments. Is that acceptable?
That is duly noted. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sir, I'm very troubled by the fact that the none of the officials who've spoken so far recognize within the official plan of the City of Kawartha Lakes, as well as the provincial policy, that the aspect of maintenance of cultural significance needs to be taken into account. All we've heard about is the desire to develop lots. And while that is true, it is not a factor that overrides the responsibility to maintain the cultural significance. And I want it to also be understood, Mr. Chair, that we are not, as the owners of 155 William Street North, speaking just on our own behalf. This property is the Carew House, and it is a well-known historic landmark in the former town of Lindsay. In fact, one would say a founding father of the town of Lindsay actually built this home and the homes in this immediate area. So the cultural significance, it's not that we are property owners who object to it. We are stewards of the culture and history of this property, and we are speaking to have that respected. Whether we were the owners of this home or not, the cultural significance is part of what needs to be respected in decisions for the official plan and also for the provincial policy, both of which I have reviewed. And the comment made by Ms. Turner with respect to this application indicates that the home is in keeping with the character of the local area and will not have a negative impact on the adjacent designated property. There's absolutely no basis to know why Ms. Turner made that decision, going back again to the fact that according to Ms. Turner now in her last representations, that the matter did not have to be considered by the Heritage Committee and that it was only presented to them for their information. So therefore, what Ms. Turner is now telling us is it's her decision about the historical impact, which I dispute. But in any event, we were not given an opportunity to make submissions then to Ms. Turner about the historical and cultural impact of this immediate neighborhood, not just our property, as I emphasize, not just the Carew House, but in fact, this block. And some of the properties that have been referred to, they're not in the immediate area. So we're talking about in this immediate area when one drives on William Street, either north or south, as they pass by this block, what will they see? And it's very clear that this proposed minor variance to allow construction of the proposed dwelling is not in keeping with the character of the neighborhood or maintaining the cultural and historical significance of the Carew House and the neighborhood.
All right, you're finished? That's yours.
Thank you.
All right. Again, thank you very much for taking the time, and we do appreciate your comments. Are there any questions of the deputant? Any questions of the deputant? All right, no? All right. Thank you again, Ms. Clark. Is there anyone else online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to this application? I guess the other gentleman isn't here now? No.
Sorry, can I speak as well again?
Yeah. All right, go ahead, sir.
Pretty much it's like what we were opposed to in the previous one as well. Yeah, and like Mrs. Clark stated before, we stand by and yeah, but I've got nothing else to add. I just want to be opposed to it.
Again, thank you very much for taking the time. Are there any questions of the deputant? All right, sir, thank you very much. All right. Committee, where are we? Mr. Marsh.
I will move that the variance as amended.
As amended? Yep.
As amended.
All right, do I have a seconder? Okay, Mr. Richardson, you wish to speak to it, Mr. Marsh?
Again, it's unfortunate because I don't want the Clarks to feel that people don't appreciate the work and effort that they put into preserving their property, but unfortunately, we don't have the ability to control what goes on in the neighborhood as far as meeting the Planning Act and the provincial policies. And our decision is based on the facts, and the facts are, in fact, the facts.
Ms. Richardson? Any further comments? Yeah, Mr.
Thanks again, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick question here. One of the things I heard discussed was the appearance, and I understand you see a lot of current buildings with a kind of a stone base and a vinyl siding. Was there any thought when we were talking to the owners about the proposal of this house to have a red brick front on the house? It's a question to the planner.
A question to Mr. Harding. Did you hear that, Mr. Harding?
I did, Mr. Chair. And no, there was not. Please keep in mind that this application actually went to pre-consultation committee, and that's where the discussion with the heritage officer happened before it came to us as a consent application. So I am going to defer to the heritage officer just to add some additional comments around how that facade design was arrived at. But I do just want to note before I pass the mic over that if we go back to that property on the corner, that 16 Regent Street, I believe it is, that, yes, it is 16 Regent, that we do have a combination of new materials there of siding and stone. And I don't think that house really jumps out at you. But I'll pass it over to Ms. Turner now.
Go ahead, Ms. Turner.
Thanks. So the conversation regarding the facade of the house primarily was focused on the massing of the property with regard to the window, the porch. I believe that the original application had discussed an attached garage, which I had said to the applicants was inappropriate in keeping with that general historic massing that we're looking for when examining infill properties in historic neighborhoods. The conversation regarding the siding versus the stone was not one that I don't believe was had. No, I don't think we talked about that. And the reason for that would have been because there are other houses in the neighborhood with vinyl siding. Well, there are a lot of red brick houses, particularly in that stretch of William Street. Looking north and south on both Elgin and Regent, as well as on William Street itself. There's a number of other houses with vinyl siding on them, so it's not completely out of place within the wider neighborhood.
All right. And are there any questions of Ms. Turner? Again, thank you very much for taking the time, Ms. Turner. We appreciate it. Very helpful. And as I indicated earlier, this is a community process, and we appreciate the fact that Ms. Clark and the other gentlemen took the time to come and express their opinions here. That's what this process is all about. So thanks to them again. All right, I've got a motion on the floor as amended. Any further comments? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. All right, moving right along. We're now dealing with D20-2021-007, and this is 21 Prop Road, Geographic Township of Manvers. Go ahead, Mr. Stainton. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The proposal at 21 Prop Drive in former Manvers Township involves relief from the following provision of the Oak Ridges Moraine Zoning Bylaw. Section 13.2E, to reduce the minimum flankage yard requirement of 15 meters to 3.35 meters in order to facilitate the construction of a 373.55 square meter addition, consisting of an expansion to the existing living space and an attached two-bay garage fronting onto Prop Drive with a storage loft. Please note that there is no habitable space proposed within the storage loft of the garage. Next slide, please. The subject property is situated in a residential subdivision north of Pontypool. Based on MPAC data, the homes were built in the mid-1980s and reside on modest-sized lots. It's important to note that the side split dwelling configurations are a common configuration within this neighborhood. The majority of the homes along both Prop and Corbett Drive are similarly constructed with either attached garages or garages connected via breezeways to the dwellings. The dwelling does currently contain a one-car garage on the south side of the dwelling. In order to lessen the presence of built form within the front yard, as well as enhance the functionality through a connection, an attached configuration was decided upon. Since the location of the current development is shifted to the south portion or the southern portion of the lot, the proposed location of the addition northwards and away from the dwellings to the south and west is logical. Next slide, please. Here's a site plan of the proposal showing the location of the addition in relation to the property. Note, during an initial site visit, a 3-bay garage configuration was proposed. The massing implications and tree removal requirements rendered further revisions to the configuration. Ultimately, the applicant was able to increase the flankage yard requirement by an additional 1.5 meters. Next slide, please. Shown here are the elevation drawings noting the north elevations on the left, which is facing Corbett Drive, and the west facing elevations facing Prop Drive on the right. The plantings of skyrocket junipers and giant hostas on the northern face of the addition assist in breaking up the wall face on the north side of the garage. It should be noted that during the pre-screening process, larger windows and a stone brick skirt were added to enhance the appearance of the addition. Moreover, a larger bay window and garage doors with windows were added to the face of the garage, which drastically aid in blending the overall design of the addition into both the existing dwelling as well as the rural residential character of the community. Next slide, please. Again, we have elevations shown with the southern elevation on the left and the rear elevations on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. The photos, I just wanted to let the committee know that the photos included in the presentation were taken over multiple site visits and did occur in different seasons as a result. The subject property, it must be noted, is a corner lot on the southwest corner of a T intersection of, again, Prop Drive and Corbett Drive. The corner lot is, and most noteworthy, is the fact that the corner lot is one of the largest lots on both Prop and Corbett Drives with ample capacity to accommodate the addition. And it is in compliance with the lot coverage provisions at 22% with the zoning bylaw provisions, which are 25%. To the north, 3 detached dwellings front opposite to the property along Corbett Drive. If we can go back a couple slides, Charlotte, just to the aerial photography showing the overall neighborhood. One more, please. Thank you. Please note that 239 Corbett to the northwest has views screened by the large blue spruce, which are situated along the northern property line. In addition, 243 Corbett Drive is partially screened with an estimated 38 meters between the proposed extent of the addition and the front face of the dwelling at 243 Corbett Drive. And the addition is also 40 meters from the front face of the residence at 247 Corbett Drive. You may go back to the current slide, Charlotte. Thank you. It's important to note that there's only one residential lot to the south of the property before a larger park breaks up the block. To the south and west, additional side split configured dwellings persist. Approximately half of the northern lot line is delineated by the blue spruce trees, which I was mentioning before, which provide a formidable privacy barrier to the rear when viewed from Corbett Drive. It's important to note that the trees will remain intact. Shown on the slide to the left is the, oh, I think we've gone ahead here. Can you go back a couple slides, Charlotte? Next slide. Oh, sorry, forward. Okay. Sorry, I just got thrown off there. So the trees will remain intact. And then I just wanted to show that on the slide of the left-hand side is the current single detached dwelling facing west from Prop Drive, with the photo on the right showing an overview of the proposed area of the addition from Prop Drive. The house seen in the background is on the slide on the right is actually 239 Corbett Drive for some perspective. Next slide, please. I just wanted to provide a couple examples of the typical side split configured dwellings that are present throughout the Pinewood neighborhood. The addition proposed through the application, in essence, is similar to the configuration proposed throughout the subdivision. The proposed difference in height from the existing single detached dwelling in the addition will be only 1.43 meters, with a height of 6.43 meters proposed. And just to let you know that that is less than the maximum height provision within the rural residential type 1 zone, which is actually 11 meters. Next slide, please. It is anticipated that the garage will complement the character of the neighborhood and streetscape by providing enclosed storage for vehicles and other items that would otherwise be stored outside, as shown on the photo on the left, within either the rear yard or the front yard of the subject property. It's important to note that the primary objectives of the flankage yard requirement are to maintain sightlines, preserve space for road widenings, maintain land for installation or expansion of services, and shape the streetscape by regulating the placement of buildings. The photo on the right shows the approximate eastern extent of the addition. Again, through the pre-screening process, considerable consideration was given towards extending the established building line to that of the homes to the east. Next slide, please. So as you can see in the distance, considerable attention was given on the left slide to maintaining the established building line of the homes to the east. So 256 Corbett Drive is shown here in order to preserve the sight lines and prevent a jigsawing pattern of built form. Next slide, please. Given the large lots within the Pinewood subdivision on the Oak Ridges Moraine, the flankage yard requirement of 15 meters is nearly double the typical 7.5 meter requirement found in many residential subdivisions throughout the city of Kawartha Lakes. When coupled with the size of the lot, again, conceivably one of the largest lots within the subdivision, and the fact that there are no sidewalk installations, the proposed reduction to 3.35 meters is more appropriate. I'd like to note that Engineering and Corporate Assets Division has no concerns with the proposal with respect to lot drainage and grading, with the drainage swales along Corbett Drive to be maintained and no impacts to any existing municipal servicing. Another intent of the flankage yard requirement is to ensure buildings and uses do not dominate the streetscape. While the zoning bylaw requires a flankage setback of 15 meters, the closest extent to the addition at 3.35 meters from the property line abutting Corbett Drive will again be screened by a row of mature spruce trees when traveling from the west towards the intersection. The addition at its northeast corner terminates 7.6 meters from the flankage yard. Existing front yard space is preserved with no visual impedance created by the garage, with a distance of 17.72 meters from the extent of the garage to the front property line. If we could just go back a slide, please. Thank you. Shown on the left is a photo just showing the overall extent of the flankage yard facing east towards Prop Drive, with the photo on the right showing the approximate extent of the addition looking south, delineated via the orange stake in the middle, if committee can see that. Next slide, please. With regard to accessibility, the 3.35 meter flankage yard setback maintains the ability for access surrounding the dwelling as well as access to the rear for the purposes of accessing the septic system. While rear yard access can be gained on the south side of the lot, the ability to access from the north with larger machinery is essential. Without removing additional vegetation, the presence of the spruce trees again effectively screen the rear yard of the subject lands from Corbett Drive. Shown in the photo on the left is the northwestern corner and rear yard of the property, with the photo on the right showing the northwestern flankage yard. Note the position of 234 Corbett in relation to the lot. Next slide, please. The subject lands also contain a shed, shown on the left, that is used as a pump house for the koi pond in the rear yard. The shed was constructed in 1987, according to MPAC. It is important to note that the garden shed labeled as existing shed in Appendix C and shown on the slide to the right will be removed following construction of the addition. A condition is recommended in order to confirm removal of the structure upon the final inspection of the garage. Comments were received from Building Division, Engineering and Corporate Assets Division, and the Septic Division with no concerns with the proposal. Public comments in support of the application since the writing of the report were received March 18th from Ken and Susan Bro of 243 Corbett Drive to the north of 21 Prop Drive in support of the proposal. Public letters of opposition were received from Alan Armstrong of 255 Corbett Drive on March 10th and 16th, respectively, as well as a very similar letter from a Ms. Shannon Reuter of 247 Corbett Drive received on March 17th, 2021. While Ms. Reuter's letter primarily expresses concerns with respect to view obstruction, precedent setting, and her inability to construct a garage on her personal property, Mr. Armstrong's letters expressed opposition to the application for a variety of reasons. Primarily, precedent setting, maintaining the intent of the zoning bylaw, height and lot coverage, and design similar to a commercial building. In response, and based on the specific area of concern, planning staff offer the following. Obstruction of views. Using GIS mapping software, the northeast limit of the addition will be over 40 meters from the front face of 247 Corbett Drive and over 70 meters from the corner of the dwelling at 255 Corbett Drive, divided by the width of Corbett Drive and the road allowance. No shadow casting is created that would impact either property, and the enhanced treatments proposed through the application blend in with the existing single detached dwelling and the landscape plantings, along with the overall design treatments of the residential subdivision. Given the setting, it is anticipated that views of other dwellings would be commonplace throughout a residential subdivision. Precedent setting. While the lot is one of the largest within the neighborhood, perhaps being the only property that can absorb the proposed addition, I'd like to kindly take the opportunity to remind the committee that precedents cannot be considered as a determining factor, and that each application is to be examined based on its own site-specific characteristics and merits. Next, height and lot coverage. The addition is in compliance with the lot coverage provisions, as mentioned, at 22% of the RR1 zone category within the zoning bylaw. Decks and patios are not factored into this calculation as defined by the zoning bylaw. With respect to the height concerns, the proposed difference in height from the existing single detached dwelling and the proposed addition will only be 1.43 meters, with a height of 6.43 meters proposed, which is much less than the maximum height provision of the rural residential type 1 zone of 11 meters. Non-residential site design characteristics. As the property possesses a residential zone category, the lands are not subject to site plan control in terms of influencing the overall design and layout of the property. Through the pre-screening process, larger windows and a stone brick skirt were added to enhance the appearance of the addition. Moreover, a large bay window was added to the face of the garage in order to increase the appeal of the addition by giving it a rural residential appearance. Noteworthy is the fact that an automotive repair shop nor a fire hall are permitted uses within the RR1 zone category. Finally, maintaining the intent of the zoning bylaw / streetscape dominance. As mentioned in the accompanying report and this presentation, the objectives of the flankage yard requirement are to maintain sightlines, preserve space for road widening, maintain land for the installation / expansion of services, and shape the streetscape by regulating the placement of buildings. Given the large lots within the rural subdivision on the Oak Ridges Moraine, the flankage yard requirement of 15 meters is nearly double that the typical 7.5 meter requirement found in many residential subdivisions. When coupled with the size of the lot, the fact that there is no impact to abutting lots and no sidewalk installations, the proposed reduction to 3.35 meters is more appropriate. Again, Engineering and Corporate Assets Division has no concerns with the proposal with respect to lot drainage and grading, road and service expansion, and the drainage swales along Corbett Drive. Moreover, detailed consideration was given to the sightlines with an ample daylighting triangle maintained and no additional encroachment towards the established building line established by the lots to the east. Accordingly, the intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained. Based on the contents of this report, staff respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stainton. I must say that I've had quite enough of those snow scenes. But I have a question before I go to committee. Why does the zoning bylaw on the Oak Ridges Moraine seem so extreme at 15 meters? What's the rationale behind that? Have you any idea?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can only speculate. I was not involved in the creation of the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan. I do know that I can speculate, that one of the intents was to create a more rural residential feel through having perhaps an enhanced side yard setback or enhanced flankage / exterior side yard setback. However, at this time, I'm only speculating.
Yeah, I thank you for that. Are there any questions of the planner? Ms. Archer?
Through you, please, to Mr. Stainton. Is there no concern with the garage projecting into the front yard?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe it's 17.71 meter setback is ample. We did, through the pre-screening process and as part of the initial site review, site visit, actually have the garage pushed back in comparison to the projection which was proposed. Consideration in particular was given to, as I mentioned in the report and presentation, the sightlines, as well as any visual impacts that may be posed to traffic as a result of a projection to the east. And the applicant was able to move the extent of the eastern extent of the addition further west as a result. So I believe a lot of consideration with respect to any sightlines or established building line was given when we actually moved the extent of the garage back towards the west.
I believe a lot of the bylaws, you're not allowed to build a garage on the front yard. Does this not apply here?
Through you, this is actually an attached garage. So it's not a detached accessory structure and subject to the general provisions of the zoning bylaw, which in many bylaws prohibit the situation of a garage within the front yard and basically relegate the detached structure to either the side or the rear yard. But because this is attached and part of the building, it is allowable in accordance with the zoning bylaw.
Mr. Marsh?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to the planner. What's the square footage of this addition? What's the garage?
So in total, it would be, so when you factor in the garage plus the living space, it is approximately 4,000 square feet.
And the house that's there now is 1,100 square feet, or 1,125.
Correct.
Would you suggest, I'm struggling to say that's an appropriate use to have 4,000 square foot garage.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and to Member Marsh, the entirety of the garage or the addition is not a garage. There is actually an expansion to the master bedroom,
Oh,
which works
that's
to
the proposed
north,
addition?
and expands the existing master bedroom.
Okay, so let's
And
take,
then there is the garage on top of that.
so how much is there of garage space?
That's a good question. Perhaps the applicant may be able to answer that off the top.
Yep, I'll jump in for a sec here.
Sure.
Yeah, the garage is about 163 square meters, which works out to 1,754 square feet.
That includes the upstairs?
The upstairs provides an additional 49 square meters.
Which is, help me, another 1,200.
Which is, sorry.
I'm old, I need help.
Yeah,
looking
I
for
don't
some-
want to guess.
We're looking for someone with a calculator.
49 square meters is 527 square feet. So the loft would be too small for a living space, even if future owners or anyone wanted to put anything up there. And there is no direct access to the loft from outside. You would have to go through the garage. Anyway, sorry, I'll let you get back to it, Ken.
What size is the addition?
Is that the planner?
4,000 square feet, 373
No,
square
the
meters.
proposed, no, the living portion, the proposed addition for the living.
I would go back to the applicant for the specifics on that. He seemed to have it.
The bedroom, I believe.
Another 42.6 square meters. It's about 450 square feet.
Total square footage of the residence is gonna be 1,525 approximately, and you're gonna have garage spacing of like well over 3,000 square feet if you take into consideration the single-car garage, correct? To someone?
Sorry, is that through you, Mr. Chair? Is that directed at me or?
Yeah,
the
I guess just, I'm trying to justify why, I don't think it's, if we start building subdivisions where the garages are twice the size of the residential unit, is that good planning? Is that appropriate and acceptable use of the land?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Hang on a minute. First of all, sir, what was your name again? The applicant, what's your name?
John Penthal, applicant.
All right. I'm going to deal now with the planner, and we'll get back to you when we're finished with the planner. Go ahead, Mr. Stainton.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the applicant is actually a collector of automobiles, and as seen in one of my slides, there are several cars which are currently being housed in the front yard. The applicant has concerns over those vehicles being stored, hence the desire to have a garage of that size. This lot would be, in my opinion, the only lot within the plan of subdivision that could accommodate such a size in terms of addition. I am not concerned with respect to other properties constructing something of a similar nature. And I do understand the desire not only to house the vehicles, but to also create the addition onto the existing master bedroom. The owner purchased the house, I believe, 2 years ago, and was under the impression that the master bedroom was much larger than it was. Hence, they wanted to tie in the garage with the expansion to the master bedroom. So I can see the functionality with respect to them wanting that bigger master bedroom. And again, I must reiterate that I can only foresee this lot being of such to accommodate a similar proposal. I am not afraid of other proposals within the plan of subdivision creating similar garages of similar size, because the lots cannot accommodate them. And that's why we are entertaining this proposal.
So I guess, again, and I haven't made my mind up on this, but I find it, I don't think it's necessarily good planning to have an oddity, and that's what this will be in comparison to the other dwellings. And you're saying that yourself, it is, the lot itself allows itself to this, but you're in an area that you've got 1,200, roughly, the largest houses in there are 1,250 square feet with a two-car attached garage. This garage is bigger than any house that's in that subdivision. The garage alone.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Stain.
And that's why the original proposal was for a 3-car, and we got it down to a 2-car, acknowledging the desire to enhance the character of the community by not having so many items out front, and tidying that up. And again, going back to the work that has been done with the applicant, the treatments and exterior design elements that have been incorporated are trying to, and in my opinion, best sort of blend that and tie that rural residential community feel, the rural residential subdivision feel, in with the proposal. This is not a very commercial or utilitarian design that we have here. We do have something that is quite appealing, in my opinion, and does an admirable job of blending in with the character of the community.
Should we not be taking into consideration, this isn't about the current owner. People sell, people move. So now, what does somebody else do that's not a collector of cars is you're offering something that opens the floodgates, and you know what happens. And I just go up the street from this where a guy's got, it looks like he's got something going on, and he doesn't even have a garage, but somebody moves in here and they're going to start repairing cars, and we've got a bylaw issue. I mean, you're saying this is a one-off. It's not necessarily something that would suit everyone, but this one particular person. And by the way, he's got a great home. He's done a real nice job to date, don't get me wrong, and that's going to continue. But it's the same as the junipers and the hostas. They all die. We have no way of making people, I don't even know why we mention the junipers and the hostas and these things all the time, because if they die or they run them over with a lawnmower, there's nothing to say they have to replace them, right? So I think we've got to look beyond the applicant and say, is this the best, is this a good use to have something that is twice the size of any of the houses in there? They're 1,250 square feet, the biggest house. There might be some that put additions on. I don't understand the logic looking ahead. Are we opening ourselves up to something? But that's my concerns. We'll wait and see what else.
Yeah, I would say, Mr. Marsh, just from my perspective.
And it looks like it does look like the fire hall. It's downtown. It's nice. The fire hall is similar, and I think that's where that remark likely came from. Someone suggested it. So, again, okay.
I think for the committee members, though, we have to deal with the merits of this case. I don't think we can speculate a year or 2 or 3 years down the road about what might happen. We have to deal with this case here.
I agree. The case of the variance, not the person that collects cars or the person that's going to plant hostas or junipers.
It's just a
So I totally agree with you. You're right on. The case of the variance, is it wise? And take the individual out of it and look at the property. Is it wise for that area?
Are there further questions of, yeah?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Staton. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the applicant actually wanted to build this garage in the backyard and not move the septic system, he'd be allowed to do that, meeting all setbacks. Is that correct?
Through you, there would be issues with respect to accessing the garage as a result of the current location of the septic system. I I'm not a septic expert. However, I'm aware that driving over the septic bed repetitively in order to access said garage would be detrimental to the septic system. That is why, and as a result, they do need a new septic system as a result of the size of the addition. But that is why the configuration is such that it works to the north and then to the east.
Yeah, and I do understand that, but the garage itself and the footprint of the garage, there is room in the backyard to do it, independent of the house.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would need to be explored with respect to whether or not there is setbacks from the current septic system in order to facilitate that. The other challenge becomes gaining access to the garage independent of the septic system. Do we want to be creating a separate entrance and taking down trees or paving the majority of this lot whereby we could just connect it to the existing dwelling and work with it that way, so that the access is currently maintained from Prop Drive facilitates access to the garage. So could it be accommodated in the backyard? Theoretically, yes, but access would be challenging given the septic system.
I thank you for that answer, and it kind of leaned me towards that this is probably the best proposed use for the property. Thank you.
Mr. Strangway, question of the planner. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stainton, what is the actual measurements on this garage? You mentioned a two-car garage, but it looks quite large in the diagram. I'm just having trouble seeing some measurements on that.
So are you talking about the length and width, or are you talking about the overall size?
Length and width.
In area.
Length and width.
So according to and perhaps we could, I don't know if we could go to the plan just to show. So we're looking at dimensions of approximately 25 by 18, and that's in terms of meters. But that, again, that's not the garage in its entirety. We need to factor in the width with respect to the master bedroom in that calculation as well.
60 by 75 less, what, I don't know, even like you're just taking out a little portion of it. Is that, you're talking a 60 by 75 foot garage?
Roughly, yes.
That's not a double car garage.
Mr. Chairman, may I? Yeah, exactly. As Mr. Marsh says, I guess where my concern comes in, I think the design looks great, and I'm fine with that. But when we say it's a two-car garage we're adding, I think of a two-car garage as a 20 by 24, and then you've got another garage on the end of this. So I just think we need to be really realistic what we're saying. This sounds to me like a 3 or 4 car garage in the way I think of garages and sizing.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think I'd be more accurate to say it's a 2-bay garage in that, and I will accept that it is larger than a 2-car garage in a conventional sense. Yes, it is. And perhaps the applicant can speak to the need to that size of garage. But my understanding is that because of the number of vehicles that they have, the desire to maintain them in an indoor setting is why it is the size that it needs to be.
Mr. Strangway, follow up?
Going back to Councillor Yo's proposal, if this is strictly to store vehicles, is it a possibility as well to build some sort of storage building in the back that would allow this gentleman to store his cars without such a large addition to the house? I'm just throw that out as a question.
I will allow the applicant to answer that question as to why that configuration wasn't the predominant choice or the preliminary choice. From what my understanding is that they did again want to extend the master bedroom and then tie in the space to eliminate the storage of the vehicles in the front or rear yard. That was the primary rationale behind why the building needed to be as big as it is.
All right. Any further questions of Mr. Stainton? Mr. Marsh, did I see your hand?
Is there a plan somewhere that we can see that actually shows the dimensions of this thing?
Mr. Stainton?
Yes, there is. Can we go to the previous slide? There you can see the actual addition in relation to the dwelling. Are you looking for floor plans, Member Marsh?
Yeah, I mean, this thing is
We do have floor plans. We do have floor plans as well. Are you looking for individual breakdown of each room?
Well, I mean, this thing's getting passed off as well. It's a two-car garage. It's a two-bay garage. It's going to park 6 or 8 vehicles in there. It's 60 by 70 feet, 75 feet. Whether you take out, I'd like to know how much of the living is coming out, because that addition doesn't take out the whole garage. So that's, I just want to put this thing into perspective. That's bigger than, you know, it's the size of a barn.
Is that a question, Mr. Marsh?
Yeah, well, I'd like to know if someone can show us. I'd really like to see exactly what it is we're adding on here, because this is not.
Do you have any further slides with respect to this, the area, this is being, the square footage of this place?
Not available for the sake of the presentation, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
That's fine for now.
Any further questions of the planner? All right, being none. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
Yes, I'd like to speak to the application.
All right, go ahead, sir. We got your name before, so we know who you are. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'd like to just make a couple corrections quick. The actual garage dimensions across the front from side to side, the portion that's containing the garage doors is 35 feet wide, and the overall garage depth is 60 feet. Now, there is a jog in the garage that the bedroom takes up space, so part of the garage only has a depth of 35 foot 4 inches. So you are correct in assuming that a bunch of cars could fit in here, and that is the intent. They have 2 daily drivers and at least 3 or 4 collectible cars or cars that he has collected, and he wants space to be able to work on them too. And I'm not sure if you've ever tried to open up a car door to move a seat, like remove a seat or work on a car in a regular size garage, especially if there's another car already beside it. The other thing and reason for the garage width and size is there are going to be workbenches in it as well, and other toys and objects and things of the owner will be in there, such as ATVs and the trailers for moving them. Now, Kent and the owner as he's mentioned, went through this extensively, and a lot of it was before I became involved. So when I looked at this, and especially with the bylaws and having only a 6-meter rear setback, my knee-jerk reaction was similar, where I immediately started looking at how do we move this to the garage, how do we move the garage to the rear and reduce the amount of setback reduction that we're asking for, and try to, not chew up so much of the setback. And the more I've looked at it and played with it, the more would be, because of the odd shape of the lot and the acute angle created by Corbett and Prop Drive, moving the garage into the rear doesn't help the side setback requirement whatsoever. And if anything, it's going to make the impact worse, because when you move the garage to the rear, the the best way to site it would be parallel with Corbett Drive, which now reduces that setback along its entire side. Whereas right now we are not parallel with Corbett Drive, and the 3.35 meter side yard, flankage yard, it is a large reduction, but it's only for the one corner. The other corner, as Kent mentioned, is 7.6 meters, and the average is 5.475 meters. And I think that needs to be taken into consideration when asking for such a large reduction, because the garage and structure is so large. And the garage does fill all of their requirements for size and storage and maintenance of their vehicles. And then the proposed addition to the house, particularly the master bedroom, provides ample space there. And in future, once resources have been allocated on the owner's part, there is options in this addition to add an ensuite in the future, which, as we all know, is highly sought after. That is not part of this application. It's that cost is asked to come at a later time. But it could be done later. I think it is large. It's a large garage. It's there's no doubt about that, but it could be bigger, and it was, and they tried. So here we are with this now, and it's up to you whether the 3.35 meter side yard is going to be adequate or not. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Yoder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Could you just repeat the width of the garage? I'm sorry, you cut out right when you said the width of the garage. The 35
The width
feet?
of the garage, the wall that contains the doors, is 35 feet wide.
Thank you.
Further questions of the applicant? Ms. Archer?
Is there any access to this garage through the house?
No.
Further questions from the committee? Mr. Marsh?
So we got the 35 straight, and the depth is 60?
60.
Less that, what's the little jog take out of that? Because it only cuts in, half of that addition cuts into the garage. So
Yeah, it's about 10 feet. Yeah.
And
little
10
over
by, how deep would it be?
The section, the bedroom that's cut out into the garage is almost 23 feet deep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Further questions of the applicant? All right, thank you, sir. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? I see faces. Do I have names? Go ahead, whoever wishes to. I've got a Mr. Gauthier, I believe, and there's someone up in the left top. I can't read the, oh, that's the Ms. Murchison. All right, we won't worry about that. All right, go ahead, Mr. Gauthier. I see you there.
I just made a mistake and pushed the wrong button, I believe.
I can relate to that with no problem whatsoever.
Yeah.
Did you wish to speak in opposition to this application?
Pardon?
Oh, you're the applicant. Yeah, okay. I'll be all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm getting too many buttons and people here now. All right, is there anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? Joel, do you have any? Ms. Murchison, appreciate you taking the time. Go ahead. You wish to comment?
Okay, I just wanted to add to the question about relocating a possible detached structure to the backyard. In reviewing the file that has been submitted for the sewage system upgrade, the future sewage system is of a size that it starts about 5 meters off the deck and will take up the majority of that backyard. So I don't think it is possible with a sewage system and direction of flow, et cetera, that you're going to be able to get a building back there.
Thank you. Any questions, further questions of the Chief Building Inspector? Mr. Mars, this is to the Chief Building Official.
I guess through him and through the applicant again.
She's a her.
Oh, sorry. I'm jumping all over the place. I'm going from
who
you
wanna-
to the planner again. I got ahead of myself.
Ms. Murchison, maybe you could give us a little tune there before you go off line? I see the guitar behind you there, so.
Yeah, I'm really rusty, so no.
Yeah. All right, there was a question to the planner. Go ahead. Is the planner there? Yep, Staton, go ahead.
Sorry, we're jumping all over the place, so.
Let's just settle down. We'll go to Mr. Staton.
What's the necessity for the upstairs of this? Like, I mean, I just cannot get my head around the size of this in comparison to the house. It just, I believe, like I said, I believe the gentleman that owns the house now and the family are their intentions are honest and true, but I'm very, very concerned that we're gonna have this massive garage down the road. And I see issues, but so what's the need for the upstairs? Because that may also help lower the roof a bit, and I think, from cosmetically, it may help it as well if we can lower that roof. So I'd be curious to know what the intent of the upstairs is.
Do you wish that to the applicant?
Mr. Chair, I can't speak to the intent behind it. What I can say is that it was intended for storage, and I did pose the question to the applicant regarding lowering the roof line. So I do believe the question regarding why it has to be as high as it does would be best answered by the applicant.
Mr. Gauthier, could you address that for us, please?
Yes, the reason is because I got a puny little basement and it's jam-packed with my two siblings' stuff and we've accumulated over the years sentimental stuff that we just don't have the space for right now. And it's just a bunch of seasonal stuff too as well. The basement's like 8 by 6 and it's puny with the laundry in there and everything else. We kind of moved here not realizing how small these bedrooms and rooms were. It was in the middle of the pandemic and everything. And I called ahead of time to try and make sure that I could get this size of a garage because I was leaving that kind of size of a garage. So I'm tired of moving, pretty much is what it comes down to. I just want to retire and relax, and my grandkids and my children, enjoy the, I want to get some skidoos and stuff like that. So this, I don't want it to look like a scrapyard here. I like my stuff put away and safe for, people stealing stuff, let's say, and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if you have a garage of your own, but they get filled up pretty fast, pretty quick. And yeah, that's pretty much the reason why I need that space there.
Thank you, sir. Are there further questions of the applicant? Did you wish to say anything further, sir, with respect to your application? Mr. Gauthier, did you wish to speak any further to it?
No, I just know that I'm going to keep up. Me and my wife love beautiful things, and we keep our property pristine. And hopefully that will reflect on other people in the neighborhood and say it might. Usually, what it does is start a chain of reactions of people upkeeping their homes and keeping our property values up as opposed to down. And we're very respectful of that. And yeah, that's all we want,
All right, and thank you, sir, for that. All right, I'm going to ask again, is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of the application? In support of the application? Anyone online wishing to speak in objection to the application? Objection to the application? It doesn't look like there is. So, all right. All right. Okay. To the applicant. All right. A question to Mr. Stainton. Go.
If this didn't require the minor variance, this application wouldn't be here. Is that correct? If it didn't need that side yard, that's the only variance.
Through you, Chairman, that is correct, Member Marsh.
Okay.
The
So,
only
and
variance
there's
required
no
is
bylaws,
the
there's no
light
zoning
yard.
bylaws on my rant about garage space versus resident or dwelling space. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I missed that. The
There's,
latter
there's,
half of
there's
that.
nothing, there's no bylaws, there's no zoning bylaws, there's no regulations that prohibit the size of the living space versus garage.
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, there are not under the rural residential
All
type
right.
1 zone.
I appreciate everyone's patience on my rant. Thank you.
No, that's what we're here for, Mr. Marsh. Come. Mr. Hawley wanted to speak there. I saw his hand. So go ahead, Mr. Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to your question about the side yard set or the flankage yard setback, the zoning regulations were largely taken over from the previous Township of Manvers zoning bylaw, and they had the 15-meter flankage yard setback. So that's what moved over into the Oak Ridges Moraine zoning bylaw. Hence, it is one of the wider flankage yards that we're accustomed to. So it is quite unusual in that sense. So.
Who was the reeve down there? Do we know? No, just kidding. Are there any further questions of the planner? Yeah.
Are you pleased to the planner? What is the normal flankage requirement if it weren't here?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, typically we're looking at around a 7.5 meter. We have seen that, and we have seen applications with respect to the nomenclature is exterior side yard, and reducing that. We often see it with unopened road allowances, making things a corner lot or other corner lots. So typically 7.5 meters.
All right. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Yoder?
I'll give you a motion as printed and speak to it with the seconder.
Langway.
Yeah, and I'm glad we had this conversation because it clarified a lot. The garage, in fact, isn't 60 by 75 feet. It's 35 by 60 with 250 square feet missing out of that for a house. So it's big, yes, I'll give you that. The upstairs for storage, we've heard from the applicant that in fact they have next to no basement. So if you can't go down, then you kind of have to go up. And I appreciate that fact too. I look at the plans, and as a builder and a committee member, I like the aesthetics. I like the approach they've taken. It does look good, and given the size of the lot, I think the lot will suit the building. So I thank you for that.
Mr. Strangway?
No, I think it's all been said. Thank you.
Further comments or questions?
One question, please. When it says condition 1, the building construction shall proceed, does that necessitate them putting in the junipers and all that stuff? Does that include it in construction, or is that kind of if they wanna?
Mr. Stain?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it does not. The only way we could mandate those would be through some type of agreement, formal agreement with the landowner. For all intents and purposes, I do take them for their word. And even notwithstanding, if they were to change the vegetation to another type, I believe the more permanent treatments, such as the window size, do an adequate job of breaking up the face of the wall and providing that more residential feel to the addition. But again, I do believe that the landscape plan will be implemented. However, that cannot be tied to the building permit.
Any further questions? All right, I've got a motion on the floor. Any further comments on that? All those in favor? And that carries. And let's take 5. Richard, can you hear me? Okay, I can't hear you, but it's now 3:26. I've talked to the committee, and thank you very much. I mentioned to them that you had suggested that if this goes late, we could go to the next meeting, and I think the consensus is that maybe we should do that. We got, 7 of these left, so it could be a bit. So if you're okay with that?
I'm okay with that. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right. All right, we'll call the meeting back to order. And we're now dealing with file number D20-2021-008. And this is 11 Manor Road, Township of Fenelon. Go ahead, Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this application is to permit a addition to a single detached dwelling and to recognize the existing shed within the side yard. The footprint of the proposed addition is not just within the existing roof area. I do want to clarify this to committee and because I don't believe the report makes this very clear. So they are proposing to fill in not just the area that operates as a 2-level covered deck. They also want to extend the addition out to the edge of the deck on the first floor. This is further identified in appendices C and D. I will leave it up to the applicant at the end if they wish to correct me. Whether or not it's going to the edge of the roof line or the deck edge doesn't really matter in terms of my opinion on these variances and tests. So here, just also to do a brief recap, committee, of the staff reports, you'll notice that the water setback and the EP zone setback values are not the same. And that is because where the shoreline is and where the lot line is are actually 2 different locations. So the EP zone is taken to the lot line edge because everything on the opposite side is owned by TSW, but the shoreline is a little bit further into TSW's parcel. So committee, that's why you see a little bit of an inconsistency between the EP zone setback and the shoreline setback. So this property is located within a shoreline residential neighborhood on the west side of Sturgeon Lake. This particular neighborhood is a peninsula, and we've got a municipal road allowance that runs down the middle of the peninsula. Where this peninsula connects into the mainland is where the peninsula is the narrowest, and particularly the lots on the eastern side of the municipal road allowance are smaller because that road was not drawn right down the center of the peninsula. So we have a lot of very small lots. Next slide, please. A lot of very small lots on the eastern side. Most of those lots are within the 300 to 400 square meter range rather. So for lots that are on private services, which this subdivision is, everything is quite tight, especially when you apply front and rear yard and water setbacks. Next slide, please. So your committee, we can see the sketch. So they're proposing to put the addition within the existing 2-level covered deck structure and then extend out to the deck edge on the main floor. And we can see the shed on the northern side yard of the parcel there. Next slide, please. And here we have the side profile. So this is if you were standing at the southern lot line looking north, what they're proposing to do here. So we can see the existing balcony that's been identified, the existing deck below with the timbers. So they're proposing to move the whole thing out to that deck edge on the ground level. Next slide, please. So we'll just do a bit of a neighborhood walk here, committee, like the first application. So 11 Manor is that dark A-frame building in kind of in the center of both photographs. We can see that there's a camper on the south side of the parcel occupying most of that southern interior side yard. The shed is visible from the road on the left of that dwelling. And then we've just got the other addresses that I picked out there, which committee can reference in Appendix B if they would like, to show that all of the construction here is quite small in terms of built form, but that's owing to the nature of how small these lots are and the fact that they are privately serviced. Next slide, please. So we're looking at the lots down from here. So we have number 15, number 17, small modest forms, and then looking slightly north of the subject property at number 9 Manor. This one is a much wider parcel, so they have enough room not only for a cottage, but a attached garage. You'll notice in the photograph on the left that is not possible because the lots are so small, there is no car storage that can be provided, which is also the case for the subject parcel. They have 2 open surface parking spaces, on one in front and one to the side of the house. Next slide, please. So the picture on the left is me standing pretty much in front of the cottage at the road looking west at the lots on the other side of the peninsula. Different story, they're a little bit, well, much bigger in comparison to the lots on the eastern side. They have a lot more depth, and in many cases a little bit more width. The image on the right is the southeastern corner of the cottage. So we can see here both the ground floor deck and then the covered second story, the covered deck on the second story rather. So I'm standing up, I'm not quite at the corner lot line. There's a dock structure behind me. So it was a little bit difficult to take photographs, but managed to get the house all in there. Next slide, please. So the image on the left is me kind of walking behind that dock structure now. I believe I'm standing, if not on the shoreline, in the water. Good thing it was frozen when we went out. So this just shows committee how close the building is to the shoreline. See a bit of snow drifting there on the right side of that left image. I believe that is into the water's edge already, but we're quite close here in terms of where the water is. Not a lot of grassed rear yard available. This deck structure, the 2-story deck structure right now, provides covered amenity space to this relatively small grassed amenity area in the rear yard. The image on the right shows the existing shed that's kind of tucked in up against the dwelling and quite close to the abutting parcel, the house on the abutting parcel. Next slide, please. So this is taken from the photograph, from the location standing on the roadside looking down between both of these structures. So we can see that the shed is quite close to number 9. We don't have the benefit of survey in this case, but going off of the owner's provided sketch, the dwelling on number 9 must be sitting pretty much on the lot line, with the eaves probably encroaching or very close to encroaching. So one of the concerns when we deal with building separation to lot lines is there enough room for lot grading and drainage? So I just want to draw committee's attention to the fact that we have a lot of overflow happening from this abutting parcel, and there's really not a lot of room for drainage to happen here or for access between the front yard of this parcel and the backyard of this parcel too, although the snow did show evidence of some people going through this very narrow area. Next slide, please. So here, committee, I'm standing on the deck of the subject parcel looking south at number 15. So we can see that the post of the supporting structure for the second floor is actually pretty much in line with the wall of number 15. And then the next image on the right, I just walked out onto the lake to look back to give committee a sense of what the rear yard is like for this parcel, as well as the 2 abutting lots. So again, we have built form that's quite close to the water. Next slide, please. So I just panned the camera on the left side. I panned it looking north. You can just see the subject parcel on the far left side of that photograph. And then the image on the right, I panned it southward. So we have the red roof building, which is number 15, and then the one that's in the center is number 17, rather. Next slide, please. And then just walking a little bit closer to the subject parcel again, to get that capture of the rear yard, the fact that it's already used for the storage of a boat and docks, quite tight. This lot is very small for cottage uses. And then the image on the right is me standing next to the deck, looking out towards the shore. Kent is way off in the distance, about where I was standing to take the picture on the left in the first place. So committee, it's always challenging when we deal with water setbacks. In this particular case, committee, I just don't feel that it's appropriate, given the size of the lot already, how constrained everything is, to further allow a projection into the water setback beyond what the covered deck already has, because you're already removing that very coveted amenity space on this parcel. And I feel that if you continue to allow a projection for water setback, the challenge becomes you're increasing use in the property, you're increasing built form. And this is a lot that really was not designed to accommodate any substantial development. And that's evidenced by the other lots along here. They're quite modest. And it's quite a challenge to get development to fit in compliance with the zoning bylaw. But I just don't feel that, given our zoning bylaw requirements and our official plan, which is to direct development away from the shoreline, that it's an appropriate course of action to say that it's minor in nature, desirable and appropriate for the use of the land, and in keeping with the zoning bylaw and the official plan to allow this projection, because everything speaks against it so strongly, in my opinion. So I am recommending that the reliefs specific to the addition be denied. With respect to the shed, because this property is so constrained, storage is obviously an issue on these parcels. I agree that we can do a reduction so that the shed can be squeezed up against the house, but I don't think we can say from a functionality perspective that it is appropriate to have that shed so close to the lot line and so close to a dwelling on the abutting lot. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. Are there questions of the planner? Mr. Strongway, go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation, greatly appreciated. In one of the slides, it looks like the property to the south is closer to the water and would be in line with this one if the addition was allowed. Is that correct?
Mr. Harding, you're not on.
Yes, thank you. I just noticed that. I'm going to check my own slide deck here beyond what committee has, if you'll give me a moment. I know the picture exists, but I believe that that house is a little bit further back, but one moment, please. Through you, Mr. Chair, I do have the image. It's unfortunately it is sideways. I can see if I can share my screen briefly. So we can see here, based on the post, I do apologize, it's sideways. SharePoint's not going to allow me to flip it, that the house to the north is slightly back from this deck post.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Strongway?
Yeah, I thought it was the one on the south. Is the intention here to extend the floor area out and use the existing roof, or are we talking about an extension to the roof as well?
Starting?
We are talking about an extension to the roof.
Okay, that's fine for now, thanks.
Further questions of the planner? Yes, Council.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, thank you, to the planner. So the extension of the roof would be about 4 feet because it already sticks over 1.8 meters, is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. And follow-up question, the current deck is, they want to repair the current deck, so the current deck and all that, everything that's there now has been permitted and is fine. So that if they did go ahead with the addition, it would not be taking at any more of the footprint that the deck currently is?
Through the chair, so just, I want to seek some clarification. So is the question, how far would the two-story addition project?
Beyond what is there now? It wouldn't project beyond what the current deck is now?
I'm going to see if I can quickly find a slide that's going to be a benefit here. Charlotte, can you go to slide 44, please? So it would go to the extent of the light gray deck on the first floor.
Right, thank you. Okay, yeah, that's exactly what I thought. Okay.
But the question is, that's pushing habitable space closer to the water, correct?
That is correct.
All right, further questions of the planner? Yes, Ms.
Through you, please, to the planner. 13 Manor, is that owned by these people as well?
I'm just looking here. Looking through Appendix B, I don't see a 13 Manor. It would likely be either 12 or 14, because that would be the odd number, sorry, the even numbers across the road.
They're number 11, right? We're dealing with number
Yeah.
11? So right beside it, which is the parking area, is what he has there, and they own that as well?
That, yes, that is their lot.
So if necessary, they could extend sideways instead of frontways, right?
That is correct. When we did go through the pre-screening, and there's been a change of staff since they started this process, our preference has been consistently that, especially when you're dealing with extreme water setbacks, reductions like this, that it's always preferable to keep the existing habitable wall as your solid form of proximity, and then just kind of build in line with that rather than bringing that habitable wall even closer to the water.
They do have an option if we turn this down.
Through the chair, that is correct. It's not their preference because they have an A-frame style building, so it would require structural changes, but they would have to examine what that would entail.
Further questions of the planner? All right, being none. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? Are you there, ma'am?
Are.
Okay, and your name is?
It's Trudy Worsley.
All right, go ahead, we're listening.
Okay, we've owned the cottage. It's been a family cottage since 1950. And we spend a lot of time up there in the summer. It is small, but it's very special to us and our children and grandchildren. We're looking for more interior space. I guess the concern we have in hearing David's report is that the people north of us a few years ago were granted permission to raise their bungalow, put a crawl space under it, And they're actually right on our property line, but that's fine with us. It's cottage area. We get along great with them, and it's a non-issue. The neighbor south of us at 13 Manor, he applied, was able to build a 2-story permanent home on the property. The person south of him, again, both of these are great neighbors of ours. He applied, was able to take down his little cottage and build a bigger cottage, and we don't feel that we're as close to the water as they are. And all we want to do is take this deck surface and make it a floor and enclose our deck so that we can have a bigger living space for our family.
If I can talk as well, it's Al Worsley. The whole point of this rental stems from our balcony is supported by 2 barn beams. One of the barn beams has been infected with carpenter ants, and so they have to be replaced with steel beams. So when you're talking about having an alternative of putting, getting more space by going out to the south side of the cottage, that's not going to help us with getting these barn beams replaced. The other thing is we're basically staying in the same footprint as our existing cottage. Like, you can say that that habitable area is moving closer to the lake, but it really doesn't, I don't think, factor in, because we're only probably 2.5 feet from water level. So it's not like it's never going to flood or whatever. And our deck is currently on 9 concrete pillars, which are going to support the new floor.
There's no foundation.
So we feel that if they're building cottages to the south of us and they're out very close to being the same distance from the water line that we are, like if they're getting support to build new cottages there, we're having a hard time dealing with not getting permission to just enclose our deck. And you know, our growing family is just needing a little more space inside when we get together.
All right, thank you. And just so you know, sir, with this committee and ma'am, the decisions we make are not precedent-setting decisions. So every case is judged on its own merits, as we're doing with your application now. So what others have done in the past, or they may do in the future, doesn't really, we don't adhere to those decisions. We look at what you're presenting and make our decisions based on that, just so you're aware of that.
Yeah.
Any questions of the applicant? Oh, Mr. Strangway.
Thank you. And through to Mr. and Mrs. Worsley, the house, cottage right to the south of you, am I not correct that the front of that cottage is closer to the water and more in line with your deck? Is that a true statement?
Yes, it
Yes,
is.
it is.
And knowing that area the way I do, I imagine if you went down the shoreline, we'd find a number of cottages or homes that are closer to the water than we all would like, but it's because of the nature of the lots in that area.
Absolutely.
That's correct. And, you know, this property belonged to my grandparents when I was growing up. and we swam at this property, and nothing's really changed over that. That's been over 70 years. There's never been an issue with water or water height or whatever. If there's anything, we find that our lake level is down lower than what we'd like to think, because they're trying to keep the Trent system at a particular level, and I guess because we're not maybe getting as much rain some summers than others, but it's never been an issue with water.
Follow up?
Just looking, I see you have a steel roof or whatever, the A-frame. Have you explored the possibility of expanding out to the side or other possibilities, or is that just a really difficult situation? I'm trying to understand what other alternatives you might or might not have.
Well, that would really destroy our bocce ball court along the side of the cottage. I'm saying that in jest. We use the side of the cottage. We sit in our lawn chairs there, and we have a hammock and a sand pile for the grandchildren to play in. And we just think it would be a huge, like, because we have to already replace these 2 barn beams, and we're putting big money into that to remove them, and a contractor is putting in the steel beams. It just seemed like a good time to go forward and extend to the edge of the deck for our property. To go outside, we'd still have to change those beams, and then it would be additional cost to try to configure something that would aesthetically look appealing with an A-frame to have a building on the side.
Mr. Fenwick?
Yeah, and how many square feet do you have in your living space right now?
Oh, I don't have the
cottages
plan in front of me, but one concern that we've had, we've got an airtight wood stove in our living room, and when the kids were younger, it was always a chore to make sure that they didn't get close to it. But I think, I'm just guessing, from the hearth to the wall, to our external wall right now might be 7 feet. So by extending it out another 10 feet to where the edge of the deck is, it would just be that much better for us when we're all there together.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
There's 13 of us now.
Any further questions of the applicant? All right. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to this application? Committee. Mr. Marsh?
Question to the planner, please.
Question to the planner? Yeah, go ahead.
What, I guess I'm a little concerned with, or confused as far as the stance you're taking. You've heard that basically the property line has been set along that road with the water frontage, and I'm wondering what the concern is you have, whether that becomes habitable space or whether it's the dock or the deck. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any impact on a negative side, so I'm curious to know your stance on that again.
Mr. Harding?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So there's 2 primary components here. One is we're going to the edge of the deck on the ground floor, not the second floor. And the second is, this is a small lot. We're losing additional outdoor amenity space. And it's already quite tight. We can see that based on how everything's being stored. So I think this is something to be concerned about is this additional loss of outdoor amenity space on a lot that already is quite constrained from a development perspective.
Not agreed. From the few properties that I see with the aerial view, there's other lots that have as much lot coverage or encroachment or greater than this particular one. So it's sort of the setting of the neighborhood. What's the difference there? And I know I'm not looking for precedent, but I can't see, if you're looking down at this, you're looking at the roof line and you're saying, okay, that's as far as it's gonna go, what, another 4 feet? And yet you look at these others with the lot coverage and they're much more severe than this particular property. So I'm having a bit of a problem convincing myself that it's gonna have a negative impact.
Mr. Harding?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to, I know it was briefly touched upon numbers 15 and 17 before, and further to Member Archer's point, whenever we are looking at water setback reductions on lots that are so constrained, our primary lens that we look at this through is maintaining the habitable space wall as your firm line of development and building in line with that, which was the case for 15 and 17. Number 15, they kept the existing footprint, went up. Number 17 was the same thing. They did not go closer to the water. They did do a covered deck, so I will concede that that did project a little bit further, but the habitable wall space stayed the same. The deck covered off a ground level concrete patio, and that number 17 did get a bit bigger, but it was towards the street. We did a front yard setback reduction so they could have a little bit more space.
Lot 9. That thing's got buildings and stuff jutting.
Is that a question, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I'm just curious.
Sorry, I didn't catch the question.
Lot 9? Like it's got more coverage than all of them put together, the looks of it.
So this is the address of number 17?
No, number 9, lot 9. To the north
yes,
of...
but I'm trying to figure out where that... I'm looking at Appendix B.
Have you got the aerial?
It's the property attached to us on the north.
Oh, on the north? Sorry. So lot 9 is a much wider, larger parcel. I am not aware of any variances that have been done for that parcel. That was not part of the research. Certainly not within my time with the city has a variance been processed for number 9.
Mr. Strangway, further?
Yes, thanks. I guess where I'm struggling with this is that, just to give a little bit of history, that if you were planning a subdivision here now, it just wouldn't get approval whatsoever. We've got a unique situation where we're along the side of the lake. As Mr. Harding has indicated, when they put the road in, they didn't put the road down the center of the peninsula. They put it certainly off to the lake side, which has created very small lots. And most of those lots along there have holding tanks. There's no septic tanks along there. My question is that, what alternatives do we leave people for adding or improving their lots and so on? And that's why I'm struggling with this. I realize we're maybe getting closer to the waterfront, but as you go down farther, I'm sure we have a number of houses along there that are closer to the waterfront. So that's where I really struggle with this too. I don't see that the Worsleys have a whole lot of options as far as what they can do here, and that leaves it difficult for folks when they don't have those options.
Further question of the planner? I'll give you a brief word, ma'am. Go ahead.
Yes, we received information back in writing that said the conservation people did not have a problem with this project. The engineering people said they did not have a problem with this project. And what was the other one? Transportation, I believe? The road people said they did not have a problem with this project.
Mr. Harding, did you wish to speak to that?
Not really, Mr. Chair. Ms. Worsley is correct.
Right. Anything further? All right. I think I've gone through support and object, so where am I, committee? Mr. Marsh?
Move that it be supported as applied for. I believe that it does meet the four tests.
Good. Further?
I think everything's been said.
Mr. Strangway?
No, as I indicated previously, I appreciate what Mr. Harding is suggesting here. And I think what we're trying to do is apply current day rules to, situations which have been created over the years. And I thank Mr. Marsh for moving it as approved.
Yeah, and I fully support the motion, except I do actually have a problem with and I agree with the planner on part 7, and it has to do with the shed beside the building, and where there is absolutely no access around that side of the cottage. And so I would ask for a friendly that section 7, as per the planner, not be approved.
Which one are you talking about?
Giving relief for the shed on the side.
Oh, I see.
Where
Okay.
there's absolutely zero setback.
All right. Mr. Harding, do you want to speak to that? The councillor is suggesting that we deny 7. Actually, he has, or 6, I'm sorry.
So to clarify, is this the component of section 7 that was originally recommended for denial?
Verify, councillor?
Yes. Yeah, the section that reduces the distance from the house to 0 and the distance from the property line to 0.6 meters.
Mr. Harding?
Okay. If committee wishes, I can draft or kind of propose a draft list of conditions based on committee's direction.
Do we want to get into that?
If it's not accepted as a friendly, it's fine by me, but I just think, given the tightness of the lots, and I realize everybody likes to have a shed, but to me, it's an unsafe situation, and it's very, very cluttered. It's almost like being attached to your neighbor.
Through you, I was just going to ask if we would require some conditions to this, and I believe the planner spoke that he would have to draft some if we're approving it.
Is that correct, Mr. Harding? If in fact this is approved by committee, you would have to amend some of the conditions?
Sorry, there was a bit of interference there. Could you repeat that, Mr. Chair?
I'm asking if the committee were to, and I'm not going to support the motion, but if the committee were to support this motion, would you have to draft some different conditions?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Sarger?
My question is, if we delete number 7, do we not have to completely remove the shed? Because, I mean, it can't go anywhere else, so can it not move over onto their bocce court?
Well, I think that's what the councillor is suggesting. Yeah, yeah.
My friendly might be that the shed, as a condition, be moved somewhere else in the lot.
Mr. Harding, are you okay with that? Rather than making a lot of revisions, are you okay with just a condition that says the shed has to be moved? I guess we'd have to specify where.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's doable, but this lot is not rectangular. So if it were to be moved to the other yard, we would need to assess whether or not there's any reductions required to either the water setback beyond what was already sought, because now we're getting on the shallower side of the lot, and whether or not there would be a front yard setback reduction required.
Counselor?
Move it to the lot across the street.
No.
Thank you for that.
All right. Ms. Archer, do you want to speak further to it? No? Okay. Is that a friendly then, that the shed be removed to?
To the property owner's property across the road.
Harding?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I'm agreeable to that. If committee approves the application, I can craft a condition to that effect.
That would mean then you're deleting number 7? 4, 5, 6, and 7, yeah. No, let's not get complicated. Mr. Harding, we're talking about deleting 4, 5, 6, and 7 and adding a condition that the shed be moved to the other lot.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that is.
Nice and simple. Okay.
Yes, those are the amendments that would be required.
Mr. Marsh, do you accept that as a friendly? All right, Mr. Strangway, you okay with that as a friendly?
Sounds like a great solution.
Right. Any further comments? All right, I have to read my writing here, so give me a minute. First of all, I'm not supporting the motion. I think there is an option, and it has to do with moving the other way. We were told can't do that because it's a playground. We're always seem to be on these applications tinkering with these water setbacks, and I am absolutely adamant about, I realize that nothing's written in stone, but dropping from 15 meters to 6.5 meters, especially when you're moving habitable space closer to the water, that bothers me. Comparing habitable space to an unenclosed deck doesn't cut it for me. I don't agree with that. I think you're moving habitable space closer to the water. And when we're doing that, it seems to me, when these applications come before us for these situations, we should be attempting to correct situations, not contribute to them. The gentleman talked about flooding. Of course there's flooding concerns. We never know. With the weather these days, that's very, very close to the water, and now you're talking about habitable space very, very close to the water. So I won't support the motion because of that. So that's where I am. Anyway, having said that, I'm going to ask for, I guess, anything. Do you want to sum up, Mr. Marsh? All right. Those in favor? And that carries. I love being an oddball once in a while. Your application is approved. Yeah, partially. All right. We are now dealing with file number D20-2021-009. This is 39 Elliott Street, former village of Fenelon Falls. Now, Mr. Stainton, the memorandum is fairly self-explanatory, but do you wish to add a little bit to that? Go ahead if you do.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if you're of the impression that the memorandum is sufficient in terms of the deferral, I would accept that decision as printed.
Okay, hang on a minute. Is there anyone online wishing to speak to this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in support of the application? In support of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? And I do that for a reason, because people are notified about coming on, and then we ask for a deferral, and they may not have heard all that, so at least we cover that base. All right, Mr. Marsh, I hand. Okay, and this, let's see, was, so come back no later than the May meeting? Okay,
That's correct.
Pardon? You're good with that?
Correct, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. And Ms. Archie, you seconded that? All right, motion on the floor that it be deferred and come back no later than the May meeting. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. We're now dealing with file number D20-2021-010. and this is 121 Island Drive, Geographic Township of Somerville. Mr. Harding, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this application proposes to recognize a deck within the rear yard attached to an existing dwelling and a shed behind a boathouse, both within the water setbacks. Slide, please. So the property is located on an island on the east side of 4 Mile Lake. The island has road access via a bridge to the road network on the east side. And this parcel is on the western side of this island. So the application meets the 4 tests for minor variance. Next slide, please. So the deck that we can see is on the north-left side of the cottage. And then the shed is the separate structure that's kind of behind the boathouse. And this is all in the southwestern side of the sketch. Next slide, please. So here we have on the left, the front of the parcel, and then the right is the rear yard standing. So I'm standing somewhere close to the shoreline, looking back up towards the rear wall of the dwelling, and we can see the deck there. So this deck is not a full second story. You can't walk underneath there. There's a lot of bedrock on this parcel. The house is kind of built into a bedrock slope, which is more prevalent on the northern side of the lot. Next slide, please. So the image on the left shows the boathouse in the center, and then the storage shed that the relief is sought for behind it on the far left there. So we can see the boathouse, although 2-story, is quite modest in stature, and this shed here is to supplement the storage of shoreline activities, or toys associated with shoreline activities rather. The image on the right is the shoreline of the subject property, the dock for the subject property, and the stairs leading up to the cottage is in the foreground there. And then these are just the other parcels and all the rear yards looking north. Next slide, please. So we have a close-up view of the deck here. So this is not a very prominent structure, and it serves as a transitional space between the kitchen and eating area, which is on the 2nd floor of this dwelling, and the rear yard, adding some amenity space on the deck as well within this access transitional area. Next slide, please. So the image on the left is taken showing the deck stairs on the northern side of the deck and the northern interior side yard. So for the purposes of establishing the reliefs, the measurements were taken to the edge of the stair rather than the edge of the deck in that image. So that's accounting for part of the reason why it seems so much closer. Also keeping in mind that we have an inlet on the northwest side beyond this parcel. Actually, it's on the neighbor's parcel, which is attributing to this much closer water setback. The image on the right is just me looking down those stairs into the rear yard and the shoreline beyond. Next slide, please. And then we have some images of the shed. In terms of how it's positioned behind the boathouse is very complementary to that storage function. If we can go back to slide 56, please. Sorry, no, 54. Wonderful, thank you. So in terms of massing impacts for the deck as well as the shed, there really aren't going to be any. The shed, first of all, is tucked in behind the boathouse. It's very minor in terms of footprint and stature. With respect to the deck, this is not a very high structure. All things considered, you can't stand upright underneath it. It has no roof structure on top of it, and it has a connecting function between a primary living space in the dwelling and the rear yard. Also, as a side note, there was a deck structure in the approximate footprint that the current deck structure is in, but that was replaced. And as part of the building permit works for other items on the property, the non-compliance of the deck was identified. The shoreline is, for the most part, quite linear because of the bedrock in this area, but it does head further eastwards the more north the shoreline progresses, and we do have a little bit of a jut out in that shoreline on the northern side, which is what's attributing or causing this setback reduction to the extent that's being sought. But overall, the recreational amenity function, the access function, and the storage function of the shed meet the 4 test for minor variance. This parcel is also within the waterfront designation of the city's official plan, and residential uses are anticipated. Staff does respectfully recommend that the application be granted, subject to the conditions identified in the report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you. Questions of the planner? All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to this application? Hello, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
You're online, so can we have your name, please?
Barry Lidford and Christine Brown.
All right, thank you very much. Who wishes to speak?
I'll say a few words. I don't have too much to say.
All right, go ahead, sir.
It's been a very comprehensive report, and I would just like to back that up and say that you know, the use of the shed is strictly for water, toys, and storage of those types of things, fishing rods, and the impact that that would have with regards to the lake. I don't feel that it would add a load, an environmental load, if you can, as you were, and you know, that the shed is appropriate. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you. Ma'am, did you wish to say anything? No?
Not at this time. Thank you very much.
All right. Any questions of the applicant? All right, thank you very much for taking the time. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to this application? Committee. Mr. Richardson.
As recommended by staff.
All right, Councillor Yeo, I saw your hand. A second. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Your application is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, David.
All right, moving right along. We're now dealing with file number D20-2021-011, and this is 28 Liberty Lane, Geographic Township of Emily. Mr. Stainton, you're back on. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose and effect of the variance is to request relief from section 3.1.2.1 to permit the construction of an accessory building, which is a detached garage with attached carport, in the front yard of the subject property. And we are dealing with the Township of Emily zoning bylaw. The application, as mentioned, proposes to construct a new 56.95 square meter or 613 square foot detached garage with a 36.85 square meter or about 397 square foot attached carport. The total area of the proposed development is 93.8 square meters, which is roughly 1,010 square feet. Next slide, please. The subject property is situated in a rural subdivision south of where the Pigeon River transitions to Pigeon Lake. The surrounding lots consist of single detached bungalows, primarily along Liberty Lane, with MPAC noting that the dwelling on the property was constructed in 1974. The deep rectangular lots were developed with the dwellings located near the midpoint of the lots. The proposal benefits from the location of the dwelling as the garage can be located partially within the front yard without detracting from the prominence of the adjacent bungalows. Next slide, please. As you can see, here is a site plan of the proposal showing the location of the detached garage and carport to the northwest in relation to the existing dwelling. Next slide, please. Shown here is a conceptual photo of the proposal just for consideration for the purposes of illustrating a vehicle parked under the carport portion of the proposal. Next slide, please. As there is no garage on the property, the location represents the most convenient location in terms of accessibility from both the driveway and the dwelling. Given the location of the well in relation to the north wall of the dwelling, an attached garage or carport is not possible. The location of the well also prevents vehicular access from being permanently established to the north side of the dwelling in order to locate a detached garage in the rear of the subject lands. The photo on the left shows an overview of the front yard as seen from Liberty Lane, with the photo on the right illustrating the approximate location of the detached garage and carport in relation to the dwelling. Next slide, please. The intent of the zoning bylaw is to restrict the placement of accessory buildings within a front yard, relegating them to the side and or rear yards. Side and rear yards are usually less visually prominent locations in comparison to the front yard. As it is usually the most visible yard from the street, front yards have the greatest ability to shape the character of the street through their appearance and use. The proposed 21.6 meter setback from the front lot line further assists in mitigating the prominence of the building. As the garage is not proposed directly in front of the building, in front of the dwelling will continue to appear as the principal use when viewed from the road. The presence of several mature conifers and trees within the front yard also assist in detracting from the location of the proposed garage and carport, as shown in both photos taken facing eastward towards the proposal from Liberty Lane. Next slide, please. The proposed location of the garage will be located in line with the rear yard of the neighboring 30 Liberty Lane, as shown on the photo on the right. A wooden fence currently delineates the property boundaries and provides privacy between the lots. Moreover, there are no windows present on the southern wall of the dwelling at 30 Liberty Lane. Therefore, no massing impacts through the presence of the carport and garage will be created through the proposal. Next slide, please. Here on the left is the view of the location of the garage facing west towards Liberty Lane, with the photo on the right illustrating the location of the well, which can be seen in the bottom right-hand corner, as well as the overall interior yard facing northwards. Next slide, please. The established building line of several neighboring lots, including 10 to 20 Liberty Lane, as shown on the left, and 30 Liberty Lane, as shown on the right, is located closer than the existing detached dwelling on the subject lands. Since the closest point of the carport is actually set back further from the road than the neighboring dwelling at 30 Liberty Lane, visual impacts will be negligible. The function of the front yard is still maintained to the south, while the proposed encroachment into the front yard by the carport and garage will blend in with the overall building line along Liberty Lane. Comments were received from Engineering and Corporate Assets Division, as well as Building and Septic Division, stating that they have no concerns with the proposal. Based on the contents of the report, staff acknowledged the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance, and staff respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Staton. I honestly believe with the technology that's available to us today, you could have removed all that snow, right?
Not a chance.
Just hoping, I guess.
But yeah.
All right. Questions to the planner? All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? And your name, sir?
And it's Tom DeBoer with TD Consulting, the applicant for the file.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
I thank Kent for the quick response on this file and much appreciated. And if there's any questions of the committee, we'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions from the committee? Looks like you got yourself an easy day. All right, thank you for that. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? Being none. Committee. Mrs. Archer?
Printed.
All right. Seconder, Mr. Strangway. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. All righty. And we're now dealing with file number D20-2021-012, and this is number 2 Ripple Street, Geographic Township of Fenelon. Mr. Stainton, you're on, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose and effect of the application is to request relief from section 15.2.1.3 subsection D to reduce the minimum rear yard requirement from 7.5 meters to 2.85 meters in order to permit the construction of a new 270 square meter or approximately 2,900 square foot 2-story cottage. The proposal replaces an existing single-story cottage constructed circa 1970, according to MPAC. Next slide, please. The subject property is located within a seasonal shoreline residential neighborhood on the east shore of Cameron Lake. The property is irregularly shaped, tapering to the south. The existing dwelling is currently situated approximately at the halfway point between the north and south property boundaries. The north side of the property contains the driveway access for the subject property and the abutting property to the northwest, which is addressed as 3 Ripple Street. The shoreline is to the west and south of the dwelling site. There are a couple mature trees found in between the dwelling and the shoreline, with the majority of the mixed forest existing along the property boundaries to the north, east, and south of the dwelling. The Victoria County Rail Trail and some dense woods buffer the property from several properties fronting onto Louisa Street to the southeast. Next slide, please. This slide shows a topographic survey and site plan with both the existing and proposed location of the cottages shown. As you can see, to the left is where we are trying to situate the proposed location. Next slide, please. The variance will facilitate the replacement of a seasonal dwelling that will improve the overall setback to the shoreline. Again, due to the irregular shape of the property, the flat expanse in the northeast corner is the widest portion of the lot, as shown in the photo to the right, providing for the most functional layout with the easiest number and least number, of reliefs required. The photo on the left shows an overview of the lot looking south from the entrance to the property. Next slide, please. The reduced rear side yard setback is not anticipated to adversely impact the ability to perform maintenance along the north and eastern sides of the dwelling. The reduced rear yard provides for increased spatial separation between the proposed dwelling and the shoreline. As the spatial separation is being increased, no adverse impacts to the available shoreline amenity area are anticipated. The photo on the left illustrates the current footprint of the cottage in relation to the sloping shoreline. Due to the presence of the existing tree line, which assists in screening the dwelling from the neighboring property at 3 Ripple Street to the northwest, as shown in the photo to the right, no adverse massing impacts are anticipated to neighboring properties. The increased water setback also negates any potential impacts that would negatively impact the character of the shoreline. Next slide, please. Shown on the left is an overview of the lot when viewed from the shoreline facing east, with the photo on the right showing the neighboring cottage to the north at 3 Ripple Street, with the aforementioned vegetative screening shown on the right, shown on the right of the picture. Next slide, please. The 4.65 meter reduction in the rear yard setback provides for sufficient maintenance access, and Engineering and Corporate Assets Department has raised no concerns with respect to lot grading and drainage. Building Division has requested a lot grading and drainage plan be prepared as part of the building permit process in order to ensure the effective containment and conveyance of runoff. The decreased rear yard setback is required in order to adhere to the minimum 15-meter water setback and environmental protection requirements of the zoning bylaw. All development will occur outside of the aforementioned setbacks. The photo on the left illustrates the vegetation present between the lot boundary and the Victoria County Rail Trail to the east. with the photo on the right, taken facing eastward, showing the multiple layers of mixed woodlands to the east. Next slide, please. Upon conducting the site visit associated with the variance application, planning staff confirmed the locations of the pump house, garden shed, and barrel sauna depicted on the site plan. Conditions are recommended in order to ensure that both the pump house and garden shed are removed, with the barrel sauna being relocated to comply with the general provisions of the zoning bylaw. The photo on the right shows the location of the garden shed and the barrel sauna in the distance, with the photo on the left illustrating how densely vegetated the southern portion of the lot is. Comments were received from Engineering and Corporate Assets Division stating they have no concerns with the proposal. Building Division has no concerns and notes that a lot drainage and grading plan will be required as part of the building permit submission. Septic Division notes that the applicant will need to complete an application for a sewage system permit for the new proposal, but there are no concerns with the minor variance proposal relating to septic requirements. Since the writing of the report, Kawartha Conservation has provided comments stating that a permit under their regulation is required. However, they have no concerns with the proposal. Based on the contents of the report, staff respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stain, and we're actually increasing the water setback. Good news.
That is correct.
Any questions of the planner? Mrs. Archer?
You to the planner, please. How do these people access this property? It looks like Ripple Street stops before it gets to them.
Actually, through you, Mr. Chair, it actually continues. It's sort of shared driveway between 3 and 2. It sort of splits right at the end, but that's where the terminus is, at 3 and 2 Ripple Street.
They do front on a municipal road?
It's a private road.
Further questions of the planner? All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? Oh,
Good afternoon, committee.
Yes.
It's Tom DeBoer again. with
Go ahead,
TD
sir.
Consulting, the applicant for the file. Just wanted to make myself available for any questions. I personally have been working on this challenging property for some time, and I do thank the planning staff for working alongside of me to come up with what we believe is the best alternative for this particular very triangular tight site. So if there's any additional questions, we did our best to sort of shift the development away from the lake this time, as you did mention. And that was done intentionally, knowing that we do have the rail trail as a buffer in behind. So we thought that was the most appropriate approach for this particular lot. So if any questions, feel free. Thank you.
well, we appreciate your comments with respect to staff, sir. We do. So thank you for that. Are there any questions of the applicant? All right. It wouldn't appear that there are any, sir. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of the application? In support of this application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? Committee. Mr. Marsh? Second. Councillor Yeo. Further comments or questions? Ms. Richardson?
Should it be noted that the drainage plan and grading and drainage plan are required? Should it be noted in one of the conditions?
That's what. Mr. Stain, do you want to address that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, similar to the requirement for the Kawartha Region Conservation Authority permit, the lot drainage and grading plan will be a part of the building permit process and will be covered under that condition.
You're okay with that? Yeah. Thank you, sir. All right. Any further comments or questions on the motion on the floor? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. All right. Moving right along. We're now dealing with file number D20-2021-013, and this is 146 Brook Street, Geographic Township of Somerville. And we got Mr. Harding back. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this application proposes to recognize a single attached dwelling that was built 0.2 meters too close to the front lot line. In particular, this is to deal with the encroachment of a covered porch. Waiting for the slide deck to pop up here. Thank you. So this parcel is within the shoreline residential neighborhood on the south side of the Brant River. And this is the only parcel, as committee can see, that's on the back side or the south side of Brook Street. Next slide, please. So in terms of the general character of the neighborhood here, all of the lots are developed on the north side with cottages and probably year-round dwellings as well. Single detached dwelling built form for sure. And on all the other sides, we have forest and wetland. Next slide, please. So here we have the sketch showing the covered porch as being slightly too close. Next slide, please. And the built form which is currently constructed, which committee will see shortly, minus the attached garage, the two-bay attached garage on the right. Next slide, please. So here we have pictures of the dwelling, so we can see parking takes place on the lot to the west, beside the dwelling and kind of in line with the attached garage. So as a result, the front yard function is not being impacted by granting this slight reduction because it's not being, this surface is not used for parking anyway. Parking is happening to the side in front of the garage, and it's not anticipated to be perceptible based on the small degree of relief that is being sought here. Next slide, please. So this is just some shots of the general neighborhood. The shot on the left is looking up the road, north up the road from the subject parcel. And then the image on the right is the road kind of leading to the west, and we can see out the forested parcel that surrounds this lot there. Next slide, please. Then we just have some pictures showing the front porch and the front yard. Next slide, please. And the last one taken from standing on top of the porch looking into the front yard. So as we can see too, in addition to the front lot line setback, we also have some additional separation between the traveled portion of the road and where the front lot line is. So it even appears that the separation is greater than what the bylaw requires. So the application meets the 4 tests for minor variance, and staff respectfully recommends that the application be granted subject to the conditions identified in the report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions of the planner? All right, being none. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? Okay. All right, advise the applicant isn't online, so they will not wish to speak to the application. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of the application? In support of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? All right, committee. Mr. Strangway.
As recommended by staff.
And I think I saw Councillor Yo's hand there, did I not? All right, you're second that? All right. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. We're now dealing with file number D20-2021-014, and this is 35 Westview Drive, Geographic Township of Emily. And Mr. Stainton's back. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose and effect of the application is to seek relief from section 12.2.1.3 subsection C of the zoning bylaw to reduce the minimum exterior side yard setback from 7.5 meters to 3.47 meters in order to recognize the construction of a wooden deck. The application is a result of a building division enforcement matter with the construction of a 26.76 square meter or 288 square foot unenclosed wooden deck on the subject property. Next slide, please. The subject property is located within a shoreline residential neighborhood, otherwise known as the Westview community. comprised of waterfront and backlots near the southeast shores of Pigeon Lake. The dwelling was constructed in 1963, according to MPAC, and appears smaller than the vast majority of the residences on the backlots along Westview Drive. The subject lands are irregularly shaped, tapering from north to south. The eastern lot line bordering Westview Drive is actually considered the exterior lot line, spanning the length of the lot. The exterior side yard essentially functions as a front yard in terms of shaping the interface between the dwelling and Westview Drive. The lands between the porched entrance of the dwelling and the southern lot line are considered the front yard. The shoreline of Pigeon Lake occupies the northwestern portion of the site. Next slide, please. Shown here is a site plan of the property showing the location of the deck. It might be difficult to see, but it is there. Next slide, please. Elevation drawings shown here are elevation drawings depicting the height, width, and length of the deck. Next slide, please. The slide on the left shows the front yard of the subject property facing north, with the slide on the right showing the attached deck in relation to the dwelling. Next slide, please. These slides just provide some visual in terms of the larger dwellings on the backlots along Westview Drive, just for reference. Next slide, please. The front yard of the neighboring lot to the south is shown in the photo on the left, with a photo of the exterior yard taken from the side of the dwelling to Westview Drive shown on the right. Next slide, please. The deck will not encroach any further towards Westview Drive than the existing limit of the northeast corner of the dwelling, with no additional expansion laterally or towards the road as shown on the left. The southeast corner of the dwelling remains the closest point of development, and there are no anticipated sightline issues with the straight segment of Westview Drive. The photo on the right gives an appreciation for how linear the lot is, with development exceeding the 30-meter water yard requirement. Next slide, please. The proposal will provide increased amenity space for the existing dwelling by extending the main floor of the dwelling. As the deck is open and a mature cedar hedge exists between the neighboring lot to the southwest, as shown in the photo on the left, no massing issues or impacts to sightlines are anticipated. Mature trees between the dwelling and Westview Drive assist in detracting from the presence of the deck, as shown in the photo on the right. Overall, the functionality of the exterior side yard will not be diminished. Next slide, please. From an accessibility perspective, the 2.27 meters from the dwelling's closest point to the road and the 4.8 meters on the western side of the dwelling will not inhibit accessibility for the purposes of maintenance for the property, nor will it create or aggravate any lot drainage patterns. Low-density residential uses, along with accessory uses, are anticipated within the waterfront designation of the official plan. All development, including the location of the deck, is located greater than 15 meters from the shoreline. Both photos shown here illustrate the expanse of the exterior side yards on the subject lands. Comments have been received from Engineering and Corporate Assets Division and Building Division indicating no objections with the proposal. Since the writing of the report, the Septic Division conducted a site visit to confirm the location of the sewage system components. A fill-based area was located as per the submitted diagram. Within this area, a concrete tank was noted through probing. The deck for the dwelling will not encroach within the required sewage system clearance distances. As such, the Building and Septic Division has no concerns with the proposed minor variance application. Moreover, Kawartha Conservation, since writing of the report, has no concerns with the proposal, and the applicant has already obtained a permit under their regulation for the development. As such, it is the opinion of staff that the application meets the 4 tests of a minor variance, and based on the contents of the report, staff respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other questions of the planner? Ms. Richards?
Through you, I just wonder why it's being recommended the applicant have 24 months when they've already constructed the deck, and usually it's 6 months.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we could reduce that to 6 months. Again, that was just based on the standard conditions for the timelines associated with the building permit.
So I'll leave that to the motion if you wish to do that. Right. Planner? Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
Hi.
You're Mr. Wong?
I'm Mr. Tai, Bill Tai.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
I have no further comments to add, but I would like to thank Mr. Stainton and the members of the committee. I'm open to questions if you guys have any clarifications that you would need.
All right, thank you for those comments. We do appreciate. Are there any questions of the applicant? All right, doesn't appear there are, sir.
Okay.
Anyone wishing to speak in support of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? Yeah. Mrs. Archer, Mrs. Richardson? As printed. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Your application is approved, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I think that kind of winds that up. Anything under other business from anyone? Just a couple of things that I wanted to say. First of all, Richard, again, I'd like to say to you and staff, a nice smooth operation with this. It's been a bit of an arduous task initially, but I think we got it down to a fine art now. It's running like a well-oiled machine, so thanks to you, Richard, and staff. It's very much appreciated. And I want to single out one of your staff members today, and that would be Charlotte. I tell you, Charlotte has done an excellent job for us here, and you know, she's always got everything in order when we arrive here. She provides clarification on issues, for me especially, but for the committee right up until we ring the bell. And if we're calling her at the office or at home, wherever she is, she's just very, very, very helpful. So, Charlotte, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. So, job well done. All righty. What's that? A motion to adjourn? I guess we could. There's no correspondence of any kind. So he's always on a run. He's missed his dinner. His grandkids are walking along 35 highway somewhere. Motion to adjourn. Dave, you got? I do have a seconder. Ms. Richardson. All right. I never lost one of these. Everybody in favor? Carries. Thank you.